Greetings, dear viewers. You're watching Arcane Paradox. We have prepared something special for you today. What if Goblin inheritance scan at age 10 detected 88 illegal bindings and Veela Nation offered Harry political asylum? Your likes and subscriptions keep this channel alive. If you enjoy our content, please show your support. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. Chapter 1. Bindings revealed. The cupboard under the stairs was stifling in the July heat. Harry Potter lay on his thin mattress, one arm flung over his eyes to block the thin shaft of light creeping through the vent slats. His 10th birthday had passed 3 days ago without acknowledgement, not that he'd expected differently. 10 years of living with the Dursleys had taught him exactly where he stood in their household. A spider crawled across the low ceiling, and Harry tracked its journey with idle curiosity. These quiet moments alone were sometimes the only peace he knew. Boy! Uncle Vernon's bellow made the hinges on his cupboard door rattle. Get out here and finish weeding the garden before the neighbors arrive. Harry sighed and rolled to his feet, ducking automatically to avoid hitting his head on the low ceiling, a lesson learned through many painful reminders. Coming, Uncle Vernon. The garden stretched before him under the merciless summer sun. Aunt Petunia had decided to host a luncheon for the neighborhood ladies, which meant everything had to be perfect. Harry wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand, leaving a smear of dirt across his brow. His oversized shirt, one of Dudley's cast-offs, clung to his skinny frame as he knelt in the soil. Hours passed as Harry methodically worked his way through the flower beds. His knees ached, his back cramped, and his head throbbed from dehydration. Just as he pulled the last stubborn dandelion from beside the fence, a strange sensation prickled at the back of his neck. The feeling of being watched. Harry turned slowly, scanning the street. There, across the road, a figure in strange clothes was watching him. Not just any clothes, but what appeared to be a perfectly tailored suit of an unusual cut. The stranger had long fingers clasped before them, and, most strangely, wore a bowler hat pulled low despite the summer heat. When the stranger realized Harry had spotted them, they gave a single, deliberate nod. Harry blinked, and the figure was gone. Seeing things again, boy. Aunt Petunia's sharp voice cut through his confusion. She stood at the garden gate, her lips pinched in disapproval. Finish up and get inside. You need to clean yourself before the guests arrive. And for heaven's sake, stay out of sight afterward. Yes, Aunt Petunia. Harry gathered the gardening tools, trying to shake the uneasy feeling that something was about to change. That night, after washing an endless stream of teacups and cake plates, Harry collapsed onto his mattress. Sleep came quickly to his exhausted body, but brought strange dreams in its wake, dreams of green light, high laughter, and a woman's scream. Nothing unusual there, he'd had these nightmares for as long as he could remember. But tonight, something was different. In the dream, flames danced at the edges of his vision, not threatening, but protective. A soft, melodic voice whispered words he couldn't quite catch. Just as the green light rushed toward him, golden feathers seemed to shield him, and he woke with a gasp. The digital clock on the shelf, another of Dudley's discards, showed 3:17 a.m. Harry's heart raced as he tried to capture the fading details of the dream. Something about it felt important, like a message he was meant to understand. A soft tap on his cupboard door made him freeze. The Dursleys never bothered to knock. The tap came again, more insistent. Hello? Harry whispered, pressing his ear against the door. Harry Potter. The voice was low, with an unusual accent. You must come quietly. Your future depends on it. Harry's mouth went dry. Who are you? A friend of your parents. We have little time. The wards are temporarily disrupted, but it won't last. Wards? Parents? Harry's mind raced. This made no sense. His parents had died in a car crash when he was a baby, that's what he'd always been told. I can't get out. The door is locked from the outside, Harry explained, keeping his voice barely above a whisper. A soft click answered him, and the cupboard door swung open. In the darkness of the hallway stood the same figure he'd seen watching him earlier, the one in the strange suit and bowler hat. In the dim light filtering through the windows, Harry could now make out a face with sharp, angular features and surprisingly pointed ears. "How did you?" "No time for questions," the stranger interrupted. "Bring only what you must have. We will provide everything else." Harry hesitated only a moment before grabbing his school backpack. He emptied his meager school supplies onto the mattress and stuffed in his few treasures, the small, broken toy soldiers he'd rescued from Dudley's trash, a smooth stone he'd found by the creek during a rare school outing, and the single baby blanket with HP embroidered in the corner, the only thing he had from his parents. The stranger watched with an unreadable expression. "That is all you possess?" Harry nodded, suddenly embarrassed. "The injustice runs deeper than we thought," the stranger muttered. "Come. We must be gone before the monitors reset. But the Dursleys will be handled. Their memories will be adjusted. They'll believe you're at a special summer program for troubled boys. By the time that story no longer serves, other arrangements will be in place." Something in the stranger's confident tone eased Harry's fears. He slipped his feet into his worn trainers and followed the strange figure to the front door. "Who are you?" Harry asked again as they stepped into the quiet street. The stranger removed the bowler hat, revealing more of their unusual features. In the moonlight, Harry could see that the stranger wasn't human, at least, not entirely. Their skin had a faint golden sheen, and their eyes gleamed like polished bronze coins. "My name is Griphook. I am a goblin of Gringotts Bank, the financial institution of the magical world." The goblin gave a slight bow. "And you, Harry Potter, are a wizard whose inheritance has been criminally suppressed." Harry stopped in his tracks. "A what?" "A wizard. Surely you've experienced unexplainable things. Objects moving when you're upset. Injuries healing overnight. Hair growing back after being cut." Images flashed through Harry's mind, appearing suddenly on the school roof when running from Dudley's gang, his hair regrowing overnight after Aunt Petunia's disastrous haircut, the zoo's vanishing glass. "That was magic?" Harry whispered, the word feeling dangerous and forbidden on his tongue. The Dursleys had always punished any mention of such things. "Indeed." Griphook's sharp teeth gleamed in a satisfied smile. "And today, we discover just how much of your magic has been kept from you." They reached the end of Privet Drive, where a sleek black car with tinted windows waited. Another goblin sat in the driver's seat. "The magical world has transportation methods that are faster but less comfortable," Griphook explained, opening the rear door. "Given what we suspect about your condition, we thought this preferable for now." Harry slid into the leather seat, his ratty backpack clutched to his chest. Everything felt surreal, like he might wake up in his cupboard at any moment. Yet there was also a growing certainty, a rightness, to this strange turn of events. "Where are we going?" "London. To Gringotts Bank. The hour is unusual, but this matter could not wait." Griphook settled beside him. "Director Ragnarok himself will oversee your inheritance test." "Inheritance?" Harry's voice cracked. "But I don't have anything to inherit. My parents didn't leave me anything," Griphook's harsh laugh cut him off. "Is that what those creatures told you? Your parents were wealthy, respected members of magical society. James Potter was the heir to one of Britain's oldest wizarding families. Lily Evans Potter was brilliant and powerful in her own right. They left you everything." The car moved silently through the sleeping suburbs. Harry stared out the window, trying to process this information. His parents hadn't been unemployed wastrels, as the Dursleys had always claimed. They'd been magical. Important. "Why now?" Harry finally asked. "Why not come for me before?" Griphook's expression darkened. "That is precisely what we intend to discover. By goblin law, you should have received your first inheritance statement on your 7th birthday. When none of our owls reached you, we began to investigate. What we found disturbed us greatly. Owls. Magical post. But that's not important now. Griphook checked a golden pocket watch. We should arrive at the bank in approximately 45 minutes. I suggest you rest if possible. The tests ahead may be taxing. Rest seemed impossible with his mind spinning, but Harry's body betrayed him. The comfortable seat and smooth ride soon lulled him into a doze. He dreamed again of protective flames and golden feathers, but this time with a sense of homecoming. The gentle stop of the car roused Harry from his slumber. Through the window, he saw they were in a quiet part of London, parked before an imposing white building with bronze doors. Despite the early hour, not yet 5 a.m. according to the car's clock, lights burned within. "Welcome to Gringotts, Mr. Potter," Griphook said, leading him toward the entrance. Harry read the warning engraved on the second set of doors: "Enter, stranger, but take heed of what awaits the sin of greed for those who take, but do not earn, must pay most dearly in their turn." A most serious warning, Harry murmured. Indeed. Only one attempted theft in our history, Griphook replied with evident pride. The perpetrators still serve as decorative elements in our deepest tunnels. Harry couldn't tell if the goblin was joking. The bank's interior was vast, with a soaring ceiling and marble floors that echoed under their feet. Despite the early hour, several goblins worked at various stations, weighing gems or counting coins that glinted gold and silver in the lamplight. Griphook led Harry past the main hall to a corridor lined with doors of dark, polished wood. At the end stood a particularly imposing door with a golden plaque, "Director Ragnarok." Griphook knocked 3 times. "Enter," called a deep voice from within. The office beyond was a stunning blend of opulence and functionality. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with ancient tomes and scrolls. Weapons of elaborate design hung between the shelves, ceremonial perhaps, but Harry suspected they had seen real use. A massive desk of black marble dominated the center, behind which sat a goblin with iron-gray hair and a face mapped with age and authority. "Director Ragnarok," Griphook said with a bow deeper than any he'd shown Harry. "May your gold flow and your enemies tremble. I present Harry Potter." Ragnarok studied Harry with piercing eyes. "So this is the lost heir. Approach, young Potter." Harry stepped forward, suddenly conscious of his oversized clothes and messy hair. "Do you know why you are here?" Ragnarok asked. Griphook mentioned an inheritance test, sir. And something about magic being suppressed. Indeed. Ragnarok gestured to a chair before his desk. "What do you know of your parents and your place in our world?" "Almost nothing, sir. Until tonight, I was told they died in a car crash when I was a baby. I didn't know about magic or being a wizard." Ragnarok's expression hardened. "A car crash? James and Lily Potter?" He exchanged a look with Griphook that Harry couldn't interpret. "It seems our suspicions barely scratched the surface of this deception." The director opened a drawer and removed a shallow stone basin inscribed with runes. Beside it, he placed a ceremonial silver knife and a crystal vial filled with clear liquid. "This is an inheritance ritual older than Gringotts itself," Ragnarok explained. "It will reveal your bloodlines, your magical inheritances, and, most crucially for our investigation, any bindings or restrictions placed upon you." "Bindings?" Harry asked. "Magical constraints. Sometimes placed on young children for safety if their accidental magic is dangerous. Always temporary, always with parental consent, always registered with both the Ministry and Gringotts." Ragnarok's eyes narrowed. "But we have detected anomalies in your magical signature that suggest something far more extensive and unauthorized." Harry swallowed hard. "Will it hurt?" "The ritual requires 7 drops of blood. The cut will sting momentarily, but we will heal it immediately after." Ragnarok's voice softened slightly. "I understand your hesitation, but this is necessary if we are to help you." Harry nodded and held out his hand. Ragnar took it in his long-fingered grip, surprisingly gentle for one who looked so fierce. With efficient precision, the goblin made a small cut on Harry's index finger, allowing exactly 7 drops to fall into the stone basin, where they mixed with the clear liquid from the crystal vial. True to his word, Ragnar waved a clawed hand over the cut, and it sealed instantly. Harry barely had time to marvel at this before the mixture in the basin began to swirl and glow with golden light. Tendrils of luminescence rose into the air, forming symbols and words that Harry couldn't read. Both goblins, however, could apparently understand these symbols. Their expressions shifted from professional interest to shock, then to outrage. "This cannot be," Ragnar whispered, his composure cracking for the first time. "Griphook, secure the room. Then summon Healer Silvertooth and Legal Master Irongrip immediately." Griphook rushed to comply, passing his hands over the walls and door in complex patterns before hurrying from the room. "What's wrong?" Harry asked, his heart racing. Ragnar seemed to be weighing his words carefully. "Young Mr. Potter, in all my 342 years, I have never seen such a comprehensive and illegal set of bindings on a magical being. The very fact that you function at all is testament to your extraordinary power." The goblin waved his hand, and a blank parchment appeared. The golden symbols from the basin began transferring themselves onto the parchment, line after line of text appearing. "This is a record of everything the ritual has revealed," Ragnar explained, his voice controlled but furious. "The list of bindings alone extends beyond anything I've encountered." As the parchment filled, Harry could see that it was organizing into sections: bloodlines, properties, vaults, magical abilities, and bindings. This last section was by far the longest, spanning most of the document. A knock at the door heralded the return of Griphook, accompanied by 2 more goblins, one wearing healer's robes of deep green, the other in formal attire with numerous medallions across their chest. "Director," they said in unison, bowing. "Healer Silvertooth, Legal Master Irongrip, what you are about to see must remain under the highest security protocols," Ragnar declared. "We have a case of unprecedented magical interference." He passed the still completing parchment to the newcomers. Their reactions mirrored the earlier shock of Ragnar and Griphook: widened eyes, sharp intakes of breath, and finally, expressions of pure outrage. 88 separate bindings. Healer Silvertooth gasped. "How is the child still alive?" "Who would do this?" demanded Legal Master Irongrip, claws extending unconsciously as he read. "And how did they expect to avoid detection?" "I believe they counted on Mr. Potter never reaching Gringotts before his Hogwarts letter arrived," Ragnar said grimly. "By then, certain parties would have established themselves as his magical guardians and could limit our access." Harry looked between the goblins, fear mixing with anger. "Could someone please explain what's happening? What are these bindings? Who put them on me?" The 4 goblins exchanged glances, and Ragnar nodded. Healer Silvertooth stepped forward. "Young wizard, magical bindings are spells that restrict or redirect magical energy. Some of yours appear to have been placed when you were just 15 months old, immediately after your parents' murder." "Murder?" Harry whispered, the word hitting him like a physical blow. "They were murdered." The goblins looked genuinely surprised. "You truly know nothing of your history?" Legal Master Irongrip asked. Harry shook his head mutely. Ragnar sighed. "This compounds the crimes against you. Yes, Mr. Potter, your parents were murdered by a dark wizard who called himself Lord Voldemort. He then attempted to kill you, but somehow, the curse rebounded. You survived with only that scar," he gestured to Harry's forehead, "while Voldemort was destroyed. You are known throughout the wizarding world as the boy who lived." Harry's hand went automatically to his lightning-shaped scar. "People know who I am." "You're one of the most famous wizards alive," Griphook confirmed. Harry struggled to reconcile this information with his life of neglect and anonymity at the Dursleys. "But then why was I left with people who hated magic? Who lied about my parents?" "That," said Ragnar, tapping the parchment, is something we now have cause to investigate. According to this, your magical guardian is listed as Albus Dumbledore, the headmaster of Hogwarts School and chief warlock of the Wizengamot. It was he who placed you with your mother's sister. And it appears, added legal master Irongrip, reading further, that he is also responsible for many of these bindings. His magical signature is on 64 of them. But why would he want to bind my magic? Harry asked, struggling to understand. The bindings go far beyond your magic, Healer Silvertooth explained, her expression grim. There are bindings on your intelligence, your physical growth, your emotional development. Bindings to make you meek, to ensure loyalty to specific individuals, to create aversion to others. Even bindings on specific magical talents that are your birthright. Harry felt sick. Someone had deliberately crippled him, made him less than he should be. Can they be removed? Yes, said Healer Silvertooth. But carefully, over time. Removing them all at once could kill you. There's more, Irongrip said, pointing to another section of the parchment. Look at the bloodline results. Ragnarok took the parchment back, his eyebrows rising. This is unexpected. What now? Harry asked, feeling overwhelmed. It seems your mother was not merely Muggle-born, as everyone believed, Ragnarok explained. She came from a line of squibs, non-magical people born to magical families. And further back, there is Veela ancestry. Veela? Magical beings of great beauty and power, associated with fire magic, Griphook explained. Their magic manifests differently than wizards. They are rare in Britain, with most living in continental Europe. And there's a binding specifically targeted at suppressing this heritage, Healer Silvertooth noted. Placed when you were just 5 years old, likely when the first signs appeared. Harry remembered strange dreams of fire that had started around that time, followed by a visit from a school counselor with a long white beard. After that, the dreams had stopped. He'd forgotten about the incident until now. This changes everything, Ragnarok said decisively. The Veela Nation has strict laws protecting their kin, regardless of how distant the relation. They consider blood bindings on their descendants a capital offense. We must contact them immediately, agreed Irongrip. This could provide Mr. Potter with diplomatic protection beyond Dumbledore's reach. Wait, Harry interrupted, his head spinning. You're saying I'm part Veela? And that might protect me from this Dumbledore person who's been binding my magic? Precisely, Ragnarok confirmed. The Veela Nation holds sovereign status in the International Confederation of Wizards. If they claim you as kin and offer asylum, not even the chief warlock can legally interfere. But what about the bindings? Harry asked. Can you start removing them now? Healer Silvertooth performed a series of complex gestures over Harry, frowning at whatever she detected. We should remove the 3 most restrictive ones immediately, they're actively damaging your core. The rest will require a careful schedule over months. Do it, Harry said firmly, surprising himself with his decisiveness. After years of having no control over his life, the chance to reclaim even a portion of what had been taken from him felt like a lifeline. The healer nodded and retrieved several potions from her bag. Drink these first, they will help stabilize your core during the process. Harry downed the potions without hesitation. They tasted strange, one like liquid metal, another like sweet smoke, the third like bitter herbs, but he felt a warmth spreading through him almost immediately. Now, remain still, Silvertooth instructed. She began a complex incantation, her fingers weaving patterns in the air above Harry's head. Pain lanced through Harry's scar, sharp and sudden. He gasped, clutching his forehead as it burned white-hot. Then, just as quickly, the pain vanished, replaced by a sensation of something dark and oily being pulled from him. A small, wispy black cloud emerged from the scar, writhing in the air before Silvertooth captured it in a crystal container. What was that? Harry asked, breathing hard. The 4 goblins exchanged alarmed glances. Something that should not have been there, Ragnarok said carefully. We will need to examine it later. For now, let us continue with the primary bindings. The next removal was less dramatic but more pervasive. Harry felt as though tight bands around his chest were loosening, allowing him to breathe fully for the first time. His vision sharpened, colors becoming more vibrant. His thoughts, always quick but often muddled, clarified like a fog lifting. The third binding's removal brought heat surging through his veins. For a moment, Harry feared he was burning from within, then the sensation settled into a pleasant warmth centered around his heart. A faint golden glow emanated from his skin before fading. The Veela heritage, Silvertooth confirmed. Still dormant for the most part, but no longer suppressed. Harry slumped in his chair, exhausted but feeling more alive than he could ever remember. Remarkable resilience, the healer commented, checking his vital signs with another wave of her hand. Most adults would be unconscious after such a procedure. What happens now? Harry asked, his voice stronger despite his fatigue. Now, said Ragnarok, we contact the Veela Nation while preparing the legal documentation to challenge Dumbledore's guardianship. Once the Veela representatives arrive, a sharp chime interrupted him. Griphook moved to a communication device on the wall, listened briefly, then turned to Ragnarok with evident surprise. Director, Ambassador Delacour of the Veela Nation has just arrived at the bank. She's requesting an immediate audience. How could they know already? Iron Grip wondered. Veela have their own methods of tracking their bloodlines, Ragnarok replied. The moment we removed that specific binding, they likely sensed it. He nodded to Griphook. Escort the ambassador here immediately. Harry straightened his clothes as best he could, suddenly self-conscious about meeting an important diplomat while looking like a ragamuffin. Ragnarok noticed his discomfort. Your appearance is the evidence of the crimes against you, Mr. Potter. Do not be ashamed of what others have done. Before Harry could respond, the office door opened to admit a woman of such striking beauty that he momentarily forgot to breathe. Tall and willowy with silvery blonde hair that seemed to float around her shoulders, she moved with liquid grace. Her eyes, a deep sapphire blue, locked immediately on Harry. Ambassador Apollon Delacour, Griphook announced formally. The woman's gaze never left Harry as she addressed Ragnarok. Director, I felt the awakening. One of our kin, long hidden from us. Her French accent was pronounced but her English perfect. I came as soon as I could. Ambassador, Ragnarok bowed his head slightly. Your timing is impeccable. May I present Harry Potter? Apollon Delacour's composed expression faltered. The famous boy who lived is of Veela descent. She moved closer, studying Harry with growing concern. So thin, so pale. And his magic, she closed her eyes briefly, seeming to sense something. By the eternal flame, what have they done to this child? 88 separate bindings, Ragnarok replied grimly. We've removed only 3 thus far. The most critical. The ambassador's beautiful face transformed with fury, her eyes flashing with an inner fire that was almost literal. For a moment, Harry thought he saw flames reflected in their depths. This is an outrage. A crime against magic itself. She turned back to Harry, her expression softening. Little cousin, do you know who is responsible for this travesty? A man named Albus Dumbledore, apparently, Harry answered. I only learned about all this tonight. Apollon's lips thinned. The great Albus Dumbledore. Champion of the Light. Her tone made it clear what she thought of those titles now. The Veela Nation has had disagreements with him in the past. But this, she gestured to the parchment detailing Harry's bindings, this is beyond politics. This is abuse of the highest order. She knelt gracefully before Harry's chair, bringing herself to his eye level. Harry Potter, as ambassador of the Veela Nation and your kin through blood, I offer you sanctuary and protection. Asylum from those who would bind your gifts and use you for their own purposes. Harry looked into her eyes and saw nothing but sincerity. After a lifetime of rejection from his supposed family, the offer from this woman, this distant relative who had rushed to his side in the middle of the night, filled a void he hadn't fully acknowledged. What would that mean, exactly, he asked, trying to think clearly despite his exhaustion. It means you would come under the protection of Veela law and diplomacy, Apollon explained. You would live among us while your bindings are safely removed. You would learn about your heritage and your magic without interference. When the time comes for your formal education, arrangements would be made that protect your autonomy. And Dumbledore couldn't reach me? Not without creating an international incident, Ragnarok confirmed. The sanctuary of the Veela Nation is inviolable under magical treaties dating back centuries. Harry considered this. He had no reason to stay in Britain. No friends, no loving family. Only a cupboard under the stairs and a lifetime of lies. I accept, he said finally. I accept your offer of asylum. Apollon's smile was radiant. Then by the ancient rights of kinship, I welcome you to the embrace of the Veela Nation, Harry Potter. She took his hands in hers, and a warm golden glow briefly enveloped their joined fingers. From this moment forward, you are under our protection. The ritual, simple but powerful, sent a surge of belonging through Harry that brought unexpected tears to his eyes. He blinked them back quickly, embarrassed, but Apollon merely squeezed his hands in understanding. Director Ragnarok, she said, rising to her full height. I request an emergency international port key for myself and my young kinsman. We should depart before certain parties realize what has transpired. Already prepared, Ragnarok replied, producing a small golden object from his desk. This will take you directly to the Veela diplomatic enclave in southern France. From there, you can travel to your sanctuary without being tracked. Wait, Harry said suddenly. What about my things at the Dursleys? My backpack has everything I own, but there's a loose floorboard in my cupboard with a few hidden treasures. The goblins exchanged looks that mixed pity with rage at this further evidence of Harry's deprived childhood. Griphook will retrieve them and send them on to you, Ragnarok promised. Is there anything else you require before departure? Harry thought for a moment. Information. I want to know everything about my parents. About my inheritance. About what was done to me and why. A comprehensive file will be prepared and delivered securely, Irongrip assured him. We will also begin an investigation into the financial aspects of this matter. If funds from your vaults were used to support these illegal activities, there will be significant penalties. Thank you, Harry said, suddenly overwhelmed by the kindness of these beings who had been strangers just hours ago. Thank you all. It is our honor to right this wrong, Ragnarok said formally. The Goblin Nation does not forget those who have been wronged, nor those who have done the wronging. The ominous undertone wasn't lost on Harry. We must go now, Apollon urged gently. Dawn approaches, and with it, the likelihood of detection increases. She held out the golden port key, a small figurine of a phoenix, Harry realized with irony. He placed his finger on it beside hers. The activation phrase is Sanctuary of Flames, Ragnarok instructed. Apollon nodded to the assembled goblins. You have the gratitude of the Veela Nation for your swift action in this matter. And mine, Harry added sincerely. Sanctuary of Flames, Apollon spoke clearly. The last thing Harry saw before the port key activated was the determined faces of the goblins who had changed his life in a single night. Then he felt a hook behind his navel, a disorienting swirl of color and sound, and his old life fell away behind him. Albus Dumbledore was enjoying a quiet early breakfast in his office at Hogwarts when the alarms began to sound. Not audible alarms, nothing so crude, but magical notifications tied to the elaborate web of monitoring spells he'd placed around Harry Potter over the years. First, the ward breach alert, something had temporarily disrupted the blood wards at Privet Drive. Next, the location tracker, Harry Potter was no longer within the confines of his relative's home. Then, most alarmingly, the binding monitors, 3 of the most critical magical bindings had been completely removed. Dumbledore's teacup clattered against its saucer as he rose swiftly, his customary serenity replaced by controlled panic. This wasn't supposed to happen. No one should have been able to locate the boy without his knowledge, let alone remove bindings that he himself had carefully crafted. He strode to a silver instrument on a nearby shelf, tapping it with his wand. The device emitted puffs of smoke that should have formed into a map showing Harry's location. Instead, the smoke dissipated without taking shape. "Impossible," Dumbledore muttered. Either the boy was dead, which he knew wasn't the case, as other monitors would have indicated such a catastrophe, or he was somewhere under powerful protection that blocked even Dumbledore's tracking charms. The fireplace flared green, and Minerva McGonagall's face appeared in the flames. "Albus! Thank goodness you're awake. We've just received the most extraordinary letter from Gringotts. They're demanding an emergency meeting of the Wizengamot regarding," she hesitated, looking troubled. "Regarding criminal magical bindings placed on a minor heir of an ancient house. They're invoking the Treaty of 1612. Dumbledore's blood ran cold. The Treaty of 1612 allowed goblins to bring direct charges before the Wizengamot in cases of serious financial or magical fraud against their clients. It was rarely invoked, and never without ironclad evidence." "Did they name this minor heir?" he asked carefully. "No," McGonagall replied. "But they've sent similar notifications to the International Confederation of Wizards and, most unusually, to the Veela Diplomatic Corps." Veela Diplomatic Corps? What could they possibly? Dumbledore's thoughts froze as a terrible suspicion took hold. Lily Evans' mysterious ancestry. The binding he'd placed on Harry at age 5 when the first signs of non-human magical traits had appeared. He'd assumed it was some residual effect of Voldemort's attack or perhaps James Potter's rumored distant connection to the Peverils. But if Lily had Veela blood, however dilute. "Minerva, I must go to Gringotts immediately. Please inform the Deputy Chief Warlock that I may be delayed for this morning's scheduled session." Without waiting for her response, Dumbledore ended the call and hurried to his private apparition point. If his suspicions were correct, all his carefully laid plans for the greater good were now in jeopardy. Severus Snape was in his dungeon laboratory, working on an experimental potion that required precise attention at dawn, when a house elf appeared with an urgent message from the headmaster. Dumbledore required his immediate presence at Gringotts. Snape scowled at the interruption but carefully placed his potion under stasis. The headmaster wouldn't summon him without good reason, especially knowing how rarely he worked on this particular project. When he arrived at the bank, he found Dumbledore engaged in a heated discussion with a senior goblin. The headmaster's usual twinkling demeanor was nowhere in evidence. Instead, he looked every one of his considerable years, his face grave. "Ah, Severus," Dumbledore greeted him. "Thank you for coming so promptly. We have a situation of the utmost delicacy." "Situation" is a rather mild term for 88 illegal magical bindings placed on a child, the goblin interjected coldly. 88? Snape repeated, genuinely shocked. Even in the darkest families, binding a child's magic was considered barbaric, reserved only for cases of dangerous magical instability. And even then, rarely more than 2 or 3 carefully monitored bindings would be used. Indeed, Professor Snape, the goblin confirmed. Including suppression of intelligence, emotional development, and even memory alterations. A most comprehensive attempt to create a malleable tool rather than allow a child to develop naturally. Snape's eyes narrowed as he looked at Dumbledore. "Who is this child?" The headmaster sighed heavily. "Harry Potter." The name hit Snape like a physical blow. "Potter's son? Lily's child?" His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "You swore to me he was safe. Protected." "He was protected from Voldemort and his followers," Dumbledore replied defensively. "The bindings were necessary to ensure, necessary." Snape cut him off, fury rising. "You bound a child with 88 separate restrictions and call it necessary? What could possibly justify such an action?" "The prophecy, damn your prophecy!" Snape hissed. "You've turned the boy into a sacrifice. The goblin watched this exchange with evident interest. It seems not all of Dumbledore's associates were privy to the full extent of his interventions. "Where is the boy now?" Snape demanded. "Beyond your reach," the goblin replied. "And beyond the reach of British magical law. The Veela Nation has claimed him as kin and granted him asylum." Veela? Snape's eyes widened. Lily had Veela ancestry? Indeed. A fact apparently known to the headmaster, as one of the bindings specifically targeted this heritage. Snape turned on Dumbledore, his expression murderous. "You knew. You knew Lily had non-human ancestry and you suppressed it in her son? After promising me you would protect him?" "I did what was necessary for the greater good, Severus," Dumbledore said softly. "Harry must fulfill his destiny, your version of his destiny," Snape corrected coldly. "Shaped by your bindings, your manipulations." He stepped back, visibly collecting himself. "Consider my vow fulfilled, headmaster. I promise to help protect Lily's son. It seems the greatest threat to him has been you all along." With that, Snape turned and strode from the bank, his black robes billowing behind him. His mind raced with implications and possibilities. The son of Lily Evans, part Veela and now free from Dumbledore's control. Whatever happened next, the wizarding world's carefully maintained balance had just been irrevocably tilted. Harry stumbled as the portkey deposited them in a sunlit courtyard. The time difference between London and southern France meant dawn had fully broken here, bathing the elegant stone buildings in golden light. Apollon steadied him with a gentle hand. "Portkey travel is disorienting the first few times," she said kindly. "Especially international jumps." Harry nodded, taking in his surroundings. The courtyard was part of what appeared to be a small but beautiful estate, with flowering vines climbing the walls and a fountain playing at its center. The air smelled of lavender and some other herb he couldn't identify. "Welcome to Enclave Lumière, our diplomatic residence in France," Apollon said. "We'll rest here briefly before continuing to the main sanctuary." "It's beautiful," Harry said honestly. "And secure," she added with a reassuring smile. "The wards here are among the strongest in Europe. You can breathe easy, little cousin. You're safe now." The simple statement brought unexpected emotion welling up. Safe. When had he ever truly felt safe? A young girl of about 8 rushed into the courtyard, her silvery blonde hair streaming behind her. "Maman! You're back." She stopped short at the sight of Harry, curiosity replacing excitement in her expression. "Gabrielle, ma chérie," Apollon greeted her. "This is Harry Potter, our newly discovered kinsman. Harry, this is my younger daughter, Gabrielle." The girl approached without hesitation, studying Harry with unabashed interest. "You have fire in you," she declared in accented English. "Hidden, but growing." Harry blinked at this strange greeting. Nice to meet you too." Gabrielle giggled at his confusion. "Veela children often see magic more directly than adults," Apollon explained. "It's a gift that typically fades with formal training." Another figure appeared in the courtyard doorway, an older girl, perhaps 13 or 14, with the same silvery hair but a more reserved demeanor. "And this is my elder daughter, Fleur," Apollon introduced. "Fleur, come meet Harry Potter." Unlike her sister, Fleur approached cautiously, her eyes narrowed in assessment. "The famous Harry Potter has Veela blood? This is unexpected." As was the discovery that he has been subjected to 88 illegal bindings, Apollon added quietly. Fleur's expression shifted instantly from skepticism to shock, then outrage. 88? Who would dare? Albus Dumbledore, primarily, Apollon replied. The British Ministry's chief warlock and the head of their primary magical school. Fleur muttered something in French that made her mother raise an eyebrow in warning. Harry will be staying with us while his bindings are removed and he recovers, Apollon continued. I've invoked diplomatic asylum. Good, Fleur said firmly. Her gaze softened as she looked at Harry more carefully. You look exhausted. And, are those clothes meant to be so large? Harry felt his face heat with embarrassment. They're hand-me-downs from my cousin. He's a lot bigger than me. The three Veela exchanged glances laden with meaning. Let's get you settled, Apollon said, smoothly changing the subject. You need rest after the binding removals, and we have much to discuss when you're ready. As they led him into the elegant residence, Harry felt the events of the night catching up with him. From his cupboard under the stairs to a Veela diplomatic enclave in France in less than 6 hours. His life had transformed so completely it was hard to process. Yet despite the overwhelming nature of these revelations, one feeling dominated: hope. For the first time in his memory, Harry Potter had found people who saw him, truly saw him, and wanted to help him become who he was meant to be, not who others wanted him to be. As he drifted off to sleep in a guest room more luxurious than anything he'd ever experienced, Harry dreamed of flames that didn't burn and golden feathers that shielded him from harm. Only this time, they weren't just dreams, they were promises of a heritage awakening within him and a future suddenly rich with possibility. Chapter 2, Sanctuary of Flames. The golden dawn filtering through gauzy curtains woke Harry from the deepest sleep he could remember. For a moment, disorientation gripped him. The bed was too soft, the room too spacious, the silence too complete. No Aunt Petunia rapping on his cupboard door, no Dudley thundering down the stairs above his head. Then memory returned in a rush. Gringotts. The inheritance test. 88 bindings. Veela blood. Ambassador Delacour offering asylum. Harry sat up slowly, marveling at the absence of his usual morning stiffness. The guest room in the Delacour residence was elegant but understated, cream walls, polished wood furniture, and a bed that felt like sleeping on a cloud. A set of clothes lay folded at the foot of his bed, clothes that looked new and approximately his size. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Harry? Are you awake? Apollon's voice called gently. Yes, come in, he replied, suddenly self-conscious about being in bed in this fine room. Apollon entered, carrying a tray. The scent of fresh pastries and hot chocolate made Harry's stomach rumble embarrassingly loud. She smiled, setting the tray on a small table by the window. How are you feeling this morning? She asked, drawing back the curtains fully to reveal a view of flowering gardens. Harry considered the question seriously. Different, he finally said. Lighter, somehow. But also, raw. Like I've lost a layer of skin I didn't know I had. Apollon nodded. An apt description. The removal of those 3 primary bindings has already begun to change how your magic flows. Your core is adjusting. Harry slipped out of bed and padded to the table, eyeing the breakfast with poorly concealed hunger. Apollon gestured for him to eat. Please, don't wait. Growing boys need nourishment, especially when recovering from magical trauma. Harry needed no further encouragement. He bit into a flaky pastry filled with chocolate, barely stifling a moan of appreciation. The Dursleys had never starved him outright, but he'd never been allowed to eat his fill either, especially not of anything so delicious. Once you've eaten and dressed, Apollon continued, we should discuss next steps. The port key to our main sanctuary is prepared whenever you're ready. The main sanctuary? Harry asked between bites. Is it far from here? Not in distance, but it exists in a different magical space. The diplomatic enclave must remain accessible to outsiders by necessity. The sanctuary is, more selective in its welcome. Harry nodded, understanding the implication. Greater security meant greater safety. Will Fleur and Gabrielle be coming too? He asked, surprising himself with the question. He'd known the girls for less than a day, yet their acceptance had already begun to matter to him. Fleur will accompany us. She's quite curious about you. Apollon's eyes twinkled. Gabrielle will join us in a few days, once her father returns from his business trip. Harry finished his breakfast in record time and changed into the provided clothes, simple but well-made trousers, a soft cotton shirt, and a light jacket. Everything fit perfectly. "How did you know my size?" he asked when he emerged from the adjoining bathroom. "Veela magic has its advantages," Apollon replied with a smile. "Are you ready to depart?" Harry glanced around the beautiful guest room, then at his ratty backpack, the only item connecting him to his old life. He slung it over his shoulder and nodded. "Ready." Apollon led him through the elegant residence to a secluded garden at the back. Fleur waited beside a marble fountain, looking slightly impatient but composed in a flowing blue dress that complemented her silvery hair. "Finally awake, I see," she said, her French accent more pronounced than her mother's. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than ever before," Harry admitted. "Sorry if I kept you waiting." Something in his sincere apology seemed to soften Fleur's expression. "It is nothing. The sanctuary will still be there whether we arrive now or an hour from now." Apollon removed a delicate silver chain from her pocket, a teardrop-shaped crystal pendant hanging from it. "Our port key. This one is gentler than the goblin-made one from last night." All three placed their fingers on the crystal. Apollon spoke a phrase in what Harry assumed was the Veela language, musical syllables that seemed to shimmer in the air. The world dissolved around them, but instead of the harsh hook behind the navel Harry had experienced with the goblin port key, this felt more like being enveloped in a warm breeze. When reality solidified again, Harry gasped in wonder. They stood on a stone platform overlooking a hidden valley nestled between snow-capped mountains. The valley floor was lush with gardens, orchards, and elegant structures built in harmony with the natural landscape. A lake of startling blue reflected the sky, and in the center of the valley rose a graceful citadel of white stone. Most striking of all was the quality of light, golden and warm, as if the valley existed in a perpetual late afternoon of perfect summer. "Welcome to Verelion," Apollon said, a note of pride in her voice. "The hidden heart of the Veela Nation. It's incredible," Harry breathed, turning slowly to take in the panoramic view. "The sanctuary has existed since before the Roman Empire," Fleur explained, watching his reaction with evident satisfaction. "When persecution of magical beings became common, our ancestors created this pocket of space between the mundane world and the pure magical realms. Like a bubble between dimensions?" Harry asked, surprising himself with the insight. Fleur raised an eyebrow, looking at him with new interest. "Precisely. A simplified explanation, but accurate. A path wound down from their arrival platform to the valley floor." As they descended, Harry noticed other Veela going about their day, tending gardens, practicing what appeared to be magical crafts, or simply enjoying the perfect weather. Most were female, but he spotted a few males as well, typically with darker coloring than their female counterparts. "I thought Veela were all women," Harry said before he could stop himself. "A common misconception," Apollon replied. "Veela males are rarer, perhaps 1 in 7 births, and they express our heritage differently. Their fire manifests more internally, in temperament and magical affinity rather than physical transformation." Harry nodded, absorbing this information while continuing to marvel at the sanctuary. As they approached the central citadel, he noticed people stopping to watch their progress. Word of their arrival was evidently spreading. A delegation awaited them at the citadel entrance, 3 elderly Veela women whose silver hair seemed to shimmer with an inner light. Despite their apparent age, they stood tall and regal. "The Council of Elders," Fleur whispered to Harry. "They govern the sanctuary and represent us in the larger Veela Nation." Apollon stepped forward and bowed her head respectfully. "Honored elders, I present to you Harry James Potter, son of Lily Evans Potter, descendant of the Argentum bloodline through his mother's maternal line." Harry awkwardly mimicked Apollon's bow, feeling intensely scrutinized by the elder's penetrating gaze. "We have felt the awakening," said the central elder, her voice melodious despite its age. "Long has the Argentum line been lost to us. Welcome home, young kinsman." "Thank you," Harry replied, unsure of the proper protocol. I'm still learning about all of this." As expected, the elder on the left said, her expression softening. The bindings kept knowledge from you as surely as they suppressed your heritage. She extended her hands. I am Elder Lysithea. My colleagues are Elders Callianira and Thalassa. We have guided our people here for over a century. Harry shook each elder's hand in turn, feeling a gentle warmth flow between them at each contact, as if their magic was greeting his. Ambassador Delacour has informed us of your situation, Elder Callianira continued. The healing temple has been prepared, and our most skilled practitioners await. Healing temple? Harry asked. For the removal of your remaining bindings, Elder Thalassa explained. A delicate process that must be handled with the utmost care. Harry swallowed hard, remembering the mixture of pain and relief when the goblins had removed just 3 of his bindings. The thought of repeating that process another 85 times was daunting. Elder Lysithea seemed to sense his apprehension. Fear not, young one. The process will be gradual. Today, we will assess all bindings and remove only those that pose immediate danger to your health. Ambassador Delacour will remain as your advocate, Elder Callianira added. And young Fleur has requested permission to assist in your acclimation to our ways. Harry glanced at Fleur, surprised. She met his gaze steadily, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. We have all been young and in unfamiliar surroundings, she said, as if defending her decision. Besides, I am curious about Britain, having never visited. Fleur is also one of our most promising students of healing arts, Apollon added with maternal pride. Her presence during your recovery may prove beneficial beyond simple companionship. The idea of having someone close to his own age as a guide through this strange new world appealed to Harry. He nodded gratefully to Fleur. That would be brilliant. Thank you. Then it is settled, declared Elder Thalassa. Let us proceed to the healing temple. The sooner we begin, the sooner your true self can emerge. The healing temple stood apart from the other structures, built over a natural hot spring that sent tendrils of steam rising through strategically placed openings in its marble floor. The circular main chamber was open to the sky through a domed ceiling of enchanted glass that seemed to amplify the golden sunlight. A team of healers awaited them, 3 women and 2 men, all wearing flowing robes of pale green embroidered with silver flames around the hems. This is Master Healer Solane, Elder Lysithea introduced the eldest of the group, a Veela woman with auburn hair streaked with silver. She has studied binding magics for over 60 years. Master Healer Solane approached Harry with a kind but evaluating gaze. May I? She asked, her hands raised but not touching him. Harry nodded, and she placed her palms gently on either side of his head. Unlike Healer Silvertooth's examination at Gringotts, which had felt clinical and detached, Solane's touch carried warmth and compassion. Harry felt his tension ease as she carefully probed his magical core with her own. After several minutes, she stepped back, her expression troubled. The goblin assessment was accurate but incomplete, she reported to the assembled group. I count 85 remaining bindings, but they are interwoven in complex patterns. Removing them in the wrong sequence could cause cascading magical shock. Can you map the patterns? Apollon asked. Yes, but it will take time. Solane turned back to Harry. Young one, we must create a complete magical imprint of your current state. The process is not painful, but it requires you to enter a trance-like state while we work. How long will it take? Harry asked. Several hours for the mapping. Then we must analyze the results before attempting any further removals. Solane's eyes were kind but serious. This is not a process that can be rushed. Harry thought of all the years he'd lived with these bindings, unaware of how they constrained him. A few more hours or even days seemed a small price for freedom. I understand. What do I need to do? Simply lie down on the central dais and allow us to guide you into the trance, Solane explained, indicating a raised circular platform in the center of the temple. Harry removed his shoes as instructed and climbed onto the smooth marble dais. The stone was pleasantly warm beneath him, heated by the hot springs below. He lay back, trying to relax as the 5 healers took positions around him. Ambassador Delacour, elders, you may observe from the perimeter, Solane instructed. Fleur, as a healing apprentice, you may join the outer circle if you wish. Harry turned his head slightly to see Fleur take a position at his feet, her expression concentrated but encouraging. Her presence, despite their brief acquaintance, provided a strange comfort. Now, Harry, Solane said, her voice taking on a hypnotic quality, focus on your breathing. Feel the warmth of the stone beneath you. Listen to my voice and allow yourself to drift. The next few hours passed in a dreamlike state for Harry. He was vaguely aware of the healers chanting, of colored lights flowing around and through him, of occasional murmurs of concern or interest. Sometimes he felt gentle touches as the healers adjusted his position or placed crystals on various points of his body. Through it all, he floated in a place of peaceful semi-awareness, more rested than frightened. Occasionally, he would surface enough to make eye contact with Fleur, who remained steadfast at her position, her blue eyes intense with concentration as she observed the senior healer's techniques. Finally, as the quality of light changed to indicate late afternoon, Solane's voice guided him back to full consciousness. Return to us now, Harry. Follow my voice back to awareness. Feel your body become solid again, your mind clear and present. Harry blinked, the world coming back into focus. His body felt unusually heavy after the weightless sensation of the trance. Master Healer Solane helped him to sit up slowly. How do you feel? She asked, checking his pupils and pulse. A bit dizzy, Harry admitted. And thirsty. But otherwise fine. One of the junior healers brought him a glass of water infused with honey and herbs. The refreshing liquid seemed to restore his energy almost instantly. The mapping is complete, Solane announced to the others. And it reveals a disturbing pattern. She waved her hand, and a 3-dimensional model of swirling lights appeared in the air above the dais. Even to Harry's untrained eye, the model looked chaotic, threads of different colors tangled in knots and whirls throughout a vaguely human-shaped form. The bindings were not placed all at once, Solane explained, but in layers over years. The earliest, she indicated a knot of dark red at the core's center, were placed when Harry was approximately 15 months old, shortly after his parents' murder. The night Voldemort attacked, Harry murmured. Solane nodded. These appear to have been placed by Albus Dumbledore, ostensibly to protect you from the magical backlash of that event. While overly restrictive, they could be defended as medically necessary at the time. She waved her hand again, and another layer illuminated in sickly yellow. These were added when you were approximately 3 years old, bindings on accidental magic, memory, and emotional response. There is no medical justification for these. Layer after layer appeared as Solane continued her explanation. Bindings on his intelligence at age 4. On his Veela heritage at age 5. On his physical growth at age 6. On his magical affinities at ages 7, 8, and 9. Each layer more restrictive, more controlling than the last. The pattern suggests a systematic attempt to shape you into a specific mold, Solane concluded. Magically powerful but intellectually and emotionally malleable. Physically small and dependent. Isolated from your heritage and potential. Harry stared at the glowing model, a visual representation of his captivity. Anger bubbled up inside him, hot and unfamiliar. He had been deliberately crippled, deliberately kept small and ignorant. For what purpose? Why? He asked, his voice tight. Why would Dumbledore do this? The adults exchanged glances, clearly weighing how much to tell him. Finally, Elder Calianira stepped forward. There is a prophecy, young Harry. One that Albus Dumbledore believes concerns you and the dark wizard who killed your parents. A prophecy? Harry repeated incredulously. Someone decided my entire life based on a prophecy. The wizarding world places great stock in certain forms of divination, Apollon explained gently. And Dumbledore has spent decades building his reputation as the greatest wizard of modern times. If he believes a prophecy marks you as instrumental in defeating the Dark Lord, he would see controlling your development as necessary for the greater good, Elder Lysithea finished. A common justification for unconscionable acts. Harry looked back at the tangled mess of bindings floating above him. So what happens now? How do we remove them? Carefully and methodically, Solane replied. Based on our mapping, I recommend we remove 7 specific bindings today, those that most directly harm your physical health and magical stability. After you've had time to adjust, we'll remove another set, continuing in a measured pattern over several months. Months? Harry couldn't hide his disappointment. It will take that long. Your body and magic have adapted to these constraints, Solane explained gently. Removing them too quickly would be like asking someone who has been bedridden for years to run a marathon immediately. You need time to adjust and strengthen between removals. Harry nodded, seeing the logic despite his impatience. All right. I'm ready for today's removals then. Very well. Solane gestured to her fellow healers, who began preparing various potions and crystals. First, you must drink these 3 potions, one for physical resilience, one for magical stability, and one for mental clarity during the process. The potions tasted progressively worse, but Harry drank them without complaint. After his experiences with the goblins' healing, he was prepared for discomfort. Now lie back again, Solane instructed. Unlike the mapping, you must remain conscious for the removals. Each binding will feel different as it releases. Some may cause momentary pain, others strange sensations or emotional surges. We will proceed one at a time, with recovery periods between. Harry lay down, his heart racing with anticipation and nervousness. He felt a small hand slip into his and turned his head to find Fleur had moved to his side. I will stay, she said simply. Sometimes it helps to have an anchor when the magic surges. Harry squeezed her hand gratefully, oddly touched by this gesture from the initially aloof girl. Solane placed her hands on Harry's forehead and began a melodic chant in the Veela language. The other healers joined in, their voices weaving around hers in harmonious counterpoint. Harry felt magic building around him, pressing against his skin like the air before a thunderstorm. Then it began. The first binding, one restricting his physical growth, dissolved with a sensation like stretching after being cramped in a small space for too long. Harry gasped as his limbs tingled and burned, growing minutely but perceptibly longer. Breathe through it, Fleur encouraged, her grip on his hand firm. The discomfort will pass. After a few minutes of adjustment, Solane moved on to the second binding, one suppressing his magical perception. As it dissolved, the world around Harry suddenly brightened, not with physical light but with an awareness of the magic saturating his surroundings. He could sense the different magical signatures of everyone in the room, see the swirling energies of the temple itself. My eyes, he gasped, squinting against the overwhelming input. Close them for now, Solane advised. Your magical sight will stabilize over time as you learn to filter what you perceive. The third binding controlled his pain responses, ensuring he would endure mistreatment without complaint. Its removal brought tears streaming down his face as years of suppressed physical and emotional pain processed through his system. This is normal, Solane assured him as he sobbed. Your body is remembering and releasing. Let it flow. Fleur's hand remained steady in his, her thumb occasionally brushing across his knuckles in silent comfort. The fourth binding had suppressed his connection to his familial magic. As it dissolved, Harry felt a surge of power from deep within, a warm, golden energy that spread through his veins like liquid sunlight. For a moment, his skin literally glowed from within. The Veela fire awakens, Elder Thalassa murmured, sounding pleased. The fifth binding had constrained his memory, particularly of his early childhood. Its removal didn't immediately flood him with recollections but rather created a sensation of doors unlocking in his mind, doors that he could now choose to open when ready. The sixth binding had limited his emotional range, especially regarding attachment and trust. As it dissolved, Harry experienced a bewildering rush of feelings: vulnerability, longing, hope, fear, all magnified beyond his experience. He curled onto his side, overwhelmed, and felt Fleur's free hand stroking his hair soothingly. "Courage, Harry," she whispered. "This one is difficult but important." The seventh and final binding of the day had suppressed his natural magical affinity for certain branches of magic, particularly those related to protection and healing. Its removal felt like cool water flowing through his magical core, soothing the raw edges left by the previous removals. As the healer's chanting faded, Harry lay exhausted on the dais. His body ached as if he'd run for miles, but beneath the discomfort lay a profound sense of rightness, as if pieces of a puzzle were finally shifting into their proper places. "It is done for today," Solane announced, her own voice tired. "You did remarkably well, Harry." "Will it always be this intense?" Harry asked weakly. "No. Today's bindings were among the most fundamental. Many of the others are more specific and will cause less systemic reaction." Solane checked his pulse again. "You need rest and nourishment now. Your body has much healing to do." Two attendants entered with a floating stretcher. Harry started to protest that he could walk, but when he tried to sit up, the room spun alarmingly. "Pride has no place in healing," Fleur told him firmly, finally releasing his hand. "Accept help when needed." Too exhausted to argue, Harry allowed himself to be transferred to the stretcher. As they carried him from the temple to a recovery suite in the citadel, he drifted in and out of consciousness, vaguely aware of concerned voices and gentle hands. He woke hours later in a spacious room bathed in soft light from floating globes. Night had fallen outside the wide windows, stars gleaming with unusual brightness in the sanctuary's protected sky. Harry sat up cautiously, relieved to find the room remained stable. He felt strange in his own body, both stronger and more vulnerable somehow. Looking down at his hands, he noticed they seemed slightly larger, his fingers a bit longer. He flexed them experimentally, marveling at the subtle difference. "Ah, you're awake." Apollon entered, carrying a tray of food. "How do you feel?" "Different," Harry replied, the same answer he'd given that morning, though now it seemed inadequate. Like I'm more myself, but I'm not sure who that is yet." Apollon nodded understandingly. "A natural response. You're experiencing freedom after long confinement, both physically and magically." She set the tray on his lap. "Eat. Your body needs fuel for the changes occurring." The meal was simple but delicious: a fragrant soup, fresh bread, and a compote of berries. Harry ate with surprising hunger. "The healers say you showed remarkable resilience," Apollon commented. "Most would have been unconscious after the fourth binding removal." Harry shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "I'm used to dealing with discomfort." A shadow crossed Apollon's face. "A skill no child should need to develop." She hesitated before continuing. "Harry, while you were recovering, we received communications from Britain. Word of your departure has reached Dumbledore." Harry tensed. "Can he force me to go back?" "No," Apollon assured him firmly. "You are under the protection of the Veela Nation now, and we have formalized your asylum claim with the International Confederation of Wizards. Legally, he cannot touch you." "But?" Harry prompted, sensing there was more. "But he is not accepting this situation quietly. He has petitioned the ICW, claiming your removal was illegal and that you must be returned to his guardianship, for your own protection." Her tone made clear what she thought of that claim. "What happens now?" "Now we fight this through diplomatic and legal channels." Apollon's expression was determined. "The goblins have provided extensive documentation of the illegal bindings. Your medical evaluation here adds further evidence. No reasonable authority would return a child to someone who has demonstrably caused such harm." Harry nodded, though worry still gnawed at him. Dumbledore seemed to have extraordinary influence in the magical world. There's something else you should know, Apollon continued. The upheaval caused by your situation has led to some unexpected developments. Sirius Black has been granted a preliminary hearing by the British Ministry. Sirius Black. The name meant nothing to Harry. Your godfather. Apollon watched his reaction carefully. He was imprisoned without trial shortly after your parents' murder, accused of betraying them to Voldemort. I have a godfather. Harry's voice rose in shock. No one ever told me. Why didn't he raise me if he's my godfather? That's what makes his case relevant to yours, Apollon explained. The Goblin's investigation into the bindings placed on you led them to review all legal matters connected to your parents' estate. They discovered that Sirius Black, as your legal guardian after your parents, was never formally convicted of any crime. He's been held in Azkaban, Britain's magical prison, for nearly 9 years without trial. That's horrible, Harry said, struggling to process this new information. Do they think he's innocent? The evidence suggests so. Particularly revealing was a sealed portion of your parents' will that Dumbledore had suppressed. It explicitly states that Peter Pettigrew, not Sirius Black, was their secret keeper. Harry's head swam with unfamiliar terms. Secret keeper. The person entrusted with hiding your family's location through a powerful charm. Only the secret keeper could reveal where you were hidden. Apollon's expression softened at his confusion. There's so much about your own history that's been kept from you. It's no wonder you feel overwhelmed. Harry set aside his empty soup bowl, his appetite suddenly diminished despite his earlier hunger. If Sirius is innocent and gets released, what happens to me? Would I have to live with him? That would be for you to decide, Apollon assured him. Your asylum here is not conditional. If you wish to build a relationship with your godfather, we would welcome him to visit. If you eventually chose to live with him, that would be your choice. But no one can force you to leave the sanctuary against your will. The reassurance eased some of Harry's anxiety. Still, the idea of having a godfather, someone his parents had chosen to care for him, stirred complicated emotions. I'd like to meet him, Harry decided. If he's innocent and was wrongly imprisoned because of me, not because of you, Apollon corrected gently. Because of Dumbledore's manipulations and the Ministry's failures. None of this is your responsibility, Harry. A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Fleur stood in the doorway, her expression uncertain. I came to see how you were recovering, she explained. If you're resting, I can return later. No, please come in, Harry said quickly, realizing he was glad to see her. Your mother was just telling me about my godfather. Fleur entered, taking a seat near the window. The man being granted a new hearing? It's causing quite a stir in the international press. The British Ministry looks incompetent. As they should, Apollon said. Imprisoning the heir of an ancient and noble house without trial is unprecedented. Ancient and noble house? Harry asked. The Black family is one of Britain's oldest and most politically powerful wizarding families, Fleur explained. Even in France, we know of them. They have a reputation for being formidable. And rather dark in recent generations, Apollon added, though your godfather was considered the white sheep of the family. He rejected their blood supremacist views and was eventually disowned for supporting your father and the light side. Harry's head spun with all this new information. Houses, blood politics, light and dark sides, it was like discovering he was part of a historical drama without having read the earlier chapters. I have so much to learn, he sighed. And time to learn it properly now, Fleur pointed out. Without bindings limiting your understanding. Speaking of which, Apollon said, rising, I should check on the diplomatic responses to our formal asylum filing. Fleur, perhaps you could answer any other questions Harry has about the sanctuary? Unless you're too tired, she added to Harry. I'm all right, Harry assured her, realizing it was true. Despite the intensity of the day, he felt more alert and clear-headed than he could remember feeling. I'd like to learn more. After Apollon departed, a brief awkward silence fell between Harry and Fleur. Though she'd been a comforting presence during his binding removal, they were still virtual strangers. "Thank you," Harry finally said. "For staying with me during the healing. It helped." Fleur nodded, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "I've been training in healing arts since I was 9. Usually, I only observe, but..." She shrugged. "You seemed like you needed an anchor." "I did." Harry picked at a loose thread on his blanket. "Can I ask you something that might sound strange?" "You can ask." "I may not answer." A hint of a smile softened her words. "What's it like? Growing up knowing you're magical? Knowing about your heritage and abilities?" Fleur considered the question seriously. "I never thought about it that way. It's like asking what it's like to have arms or legs. It's simply part of who I am." She paused, seemingly gathering her thoughts. "But I suppose it gives a sense of belonging? Of continuity with the past and future? My grandmother taught me our traditions as her grandmother taught her." "That sounds nice," Harry said quietly. "Having that connection." Fleur studied him, her blue eyes perceptive. "You have that connection too, Harry. It was hidden from you, but not destroyed. The Argentum line has a distinguished history in the Veela Nation. When you're stronger, the elders will show you the records. Do you know anything about them? The Argentum line? Only the basics from history lessons. They were known for unusual control of Veela fire, able to shape and direct it in ways most Veela cannot. They were also gifted in protective magics." Fleur smiled slightly. "Rather appropriate for the boy who lived, I suppose." Harry groaned at the title. "Is that what everyone's going to call me here too?" "Probably not. Veela care more about bloodlines than human fame." Fleur's expression turned curious. "Does it bother you? Being famous?" "It's weird," Harry admitted. "Everyone seems to know things about me that I don't know myself. They have expectations based on stories I've never heard. And apparently, some powerful wizard decided to bind my magic and dump me with abusive relatives because of it." The bitterness in his voice surprised even himself. Fleur didn't offer platitudes or dismiss his feelings, however. She simply nodded in acknowledgement. "Fame without power or knowledge is a cage," she observed. "Perhaps that was Dumbledore's intention, to keep you dependent on his guidance when you finally entered the wizarding world. But why? What could he possibly gain from controlling me? Influence. Power. The loyalty of a symbol." Fleur shrugged. "Or perhaps he truly believes he acts for the greater good, as many tyrants do. The specific motivation matters less than the outcome." Harry considered this perspective, appreciating her straightforward approach. Everyone else had been treating him with careful gentleness, as if he might break. Fleur spoke to him as an equal. "The removal of those bindings today," he said, changing subjects slightly. "Will I notice differences right away?" "Some, yes. Your magical perception is already enhanced, as is your connection to your Veela heritage. Your physical growth will accelerate somewhat, though you'll need proper nutrition to support it." Fleur glanced at his empty soup bowl. "Which it seems you're getting. And the emotional binding? The one that made me react so strongly?" Fleur's expression softened slightly. "That one may cause the most noticeable changes. You've been magically conditioned to accept mistreatment, to doubt your own worth, to seek approval from authority rather than trust your instincts. Without those constraints..." She shrugged. "You may find yourself experiencing emotions more intensely, questioning things you previously accepted, trusting people you wouldn't have before, or distrusting those you once followed blindly." Harry thought about the anger he'd felt earlier when seeing the visual representation of his bindings, sharp and hot and unfamiliar. "That's already happening, I think." "It's a good sign," Fleur assured him. "It means you're healing." Their conversation drifted to lighter topics, life in the sanctuary, the differences between French and British magical education, and Fleur's experiences as a Veela attending Beauxbatons Academy. Do people treat you differently? Harry asked. Because you're Veela? Fleur's expression clouded slightly. Some do. Veela have a certain allure. An attraction magic that affects those around us, particularly men. It grows stronger as we mature. She looked out the window, her profile suddenly distant. Many see only that surface quality, not the person beneath. That sounds lonely, Harry observed quietly. Fleur turned back to him, surprise evident in her expression. Then she smiled, a genuine smile that transformed her face from merely beautiful to radiant. It can be, she admitted. But less so among family and true friends. She stood, smoothing her dress. You should rest. Tomorrow will bring more challenges, I'm sure. As she reached the door, Harry called after her, Thank you, Fleur. For talking with me. And for not treating me like I'll break. You won't break, Harry Potter, she replied with certainty. They tried for 10 years to break you, and still, you stand. Remember that in the days ahead. With that surprisingly encouraging parting thought, she left, closing the door softly behind her. Albus Dumbledore surveyed the assembled members of the Order of the Phoenix with carefully controlled frustration. He had called this emergency meeting at their old headquarters, an enchanted cottage in the Yorkshire Dales, after his attempts to retrieve Harry through official channels had been decisively rebuffed. I still don't understand how this happened, Albus, Minerva McGonagall said, her Scottish brogue more pronounced in her agitation. How could the boy simply vanish from his relative's home? The blood wards were temporarily disrupted, Dumbledore finished for her. A sophisticated piece of magic that bears the hallmark of goblin work. By the time the monitoring charms alerted me, Harry was already within Gringotts, beyond my reach. And now he's with the Veela? Arthur Weasley asked, looking troubled. Why would they claim him? Dumbledore sighed heavily, deciding how much to reveal. It appears that Lily Evans had Veela ancestry, something I had not fully appreciated when I placed Harry with her sister. You mean you didn't know? Demanded Alastor Moody, his magical eye swiveling suspiciously. I knew there was something unusual in Lily's magical signature, Dumbledore admitted. But the specific connection to the Veela was obscured. It seems the Goblin's inheritance test revealed what I had missed. And now they've granted him asylum, Emmeline Vance summarized. Based on claims of mistreatment by his guardians. Among other concerns, Dumbledore said carefully. What other concerns, exactly? Moody pressed, his normal eye narrowing. You're dancing around something, Albus. Dumbledore met his old friend's gaze steadily. The Goblins have alleged that certain protective measures I placed on Harry as an infant were harmful. They've exaggerated the scope and intent of these measures to justify their intervention. What kind of protective measures? Arthur asked. Magical bindings, Dumbledore replied. Standard precautions, given the unique circumstances of his survival and the potential for magical instability. The half-truth hung in the air. Dumbledore knew full well that his bindings had gone far beyond standard precautions, but he had acted according to his understanding of prophecy and the greater good. Harry Potter was destined to face Voldemort again someday. He needed to develop in specific ways, to learn specific lessons of sacrifice and perseverance. The bindings had been necessary to shape that development. Standard precautions don't typically result in international diplomatic incidents, Moody growled, unconvinced. The Goblins have their own agenda, Dumbledore countered smoothly. As do the Veela. They see an opportunity to gain influence over a magically and politically significant child. And you don't? Minerva asked sharply. Dumbledore turned to her, allowing a touch of hurt to show in his expression. I have only ever acted in Harry's best interests, Minerva. Everything I've done has been to protect him and prepare him for the challenges that lie ahead. Be that as it may, Arthur interjected, the situation has grown more complicated with the Wisengamot granting Sirius Black a hearing. A murmur ran through the assembled Order members at this reminder. "Do you believe he's innocent, Albus?" Molly Weasley asked, her voice tight with old fears. The last war had claimed both her brothers. Dumbledore chose his words carefully. "I believe the evidence deserves review. If Sirius is indeed innocent of betraying the Potters, justice demands his release." He didn't add that Black's imprisonment had been convenient for his plans for Harry. As the boy's godfather and legal guardian, Sirius would have raised Harry in the wizarding world, exposed to his heritage and position from an early age. The isolated, humble upbringing Dumbledore had engineered would have been impossible. And if he is released? What then? Minerva asked. "He'll want custody of Harry." "A bridge we shall cross when we come to it," Dumbledore replied. "For now, our priority must be establishing communication with Harry. The Veela have blocked all my attempts to send messages." "Perhaps someone less associated with you could reach out," suggested Emmeline Vance. "Someone Harry has no reason to distrust." A fair point, Dumbledore conceded, though internally he chafed at the implication that Harry had reason to distrust him. "But who?" "Hagrid," Minerva suggested immediately. "He has no political agenda and genuinely cares for the boy, has been asking about him for years." "Or Bill," Arthur offered. "He works with goblins. They respect him. He might be able to get a message through via Gringotts." Dumbledore nodded thoughtfully. "Both excellent suggestions. We should pursue multiple avenues." He turned to Alastair. "In the meantime, what news of the Black hearing?" "Scheduled for next Tuesday," Moody replied. "Amelia Bones is overseeing it personally, not taking any chances after the press got wind of the Pinot trial business." His magical eye spun in irritation. "Crouch is scrambling to cover his backside, claiming it was all emergency war powers and proper procedure was followed." "But it wasn't," Arthur said quietly. "We all know it wasn't. The question is whether Veritaserum will be authorized," Emmeline added. "If Black testifies under truth serum that Pettigrew was the secret keeper, the entire official narrative collapses," Minerva finished. "And with it, many of the justifications for your guardianship decisions regarding Harry, Albus." Dumbledore inclined his head, acknowledging the point without agreeing explicitly. "We shall adapt to circumstances as they develop. For now, let us focus on establishing contact with Harry and ensuring he understands the dangers of his situation." "What dangers, exactly?" Moody pressed. "The Veela Sanctuary is one of the most heavily warded locations in Europe. If anything, he's safer there than he was with those muggles." "There are different kinds of safety, Alastair," Dumbledore replied. "Physical protection is only one concern. Harry has a destiny to fulfill. A role that requires specific preparation." "The prophecy," Minerva murmured. "Indeed." Dumbledore rose, signaling the end of the meeting. "Voldemort will return someday. When he does, Harry must be ready to face him. His current path takes him away from that preparation." As the Order members dispersed, Dumbledore remained seated, staring into the cottage's fireplace. The flames danced and flickered, reminiscent of Fawkes on a burning day, destruction preceding rebirth. Perhaps this setback could yet be turned to advantage. Harry would eventually have to return to Britain for his education. By then, Dumbledore could position himself as a wise advisor rather than a controlling guardian. Yes, he decided. All was not lost. The greater good could still be served. The path might have changed, but the destination remained the same. The following week established a routine for Harry at the Veela Sanctuary. Each morning began with a healing session at the temple, where one or two additional bindings would be carefully removed. Afternoons were spent recovering, often in the company of Fleur or occasionally Gabrielle, who had joined them after 2 days as promised. Between healing sessions, Harry began learning about his heritage from the elders and from the extensive records kept in the sanctuary's archives. The Argentum line, he discovered, had once been prominent among the Veela, known for their unusual mastery of fire magic and protective enchantments. His several times great-grandmother had married a British wizard, beginning the family's gradual integration into non-Veela society. Over generations, the Veela blood had become diluted, manifesting only occasionally in enhanced magical ability or unusual eye color, like Lily Evans' distinctive green eyes, which Harry had inherited. "Your mother must have had stronger Veela traits than was apparent," Elder Thalassa explained as they reviewed the family records. "Enough that Dumbledore felt the need to suppress them in you." "But why?" Harry asked. "What's so threatening about being part Veela? For someone like Dumbledore?" "Everything." Elder Thalassa's expression was knowing. "Veela magic works differently than human wizardry. It's more intuitive, more connected to emotion and intent. Less easily controlled by external forces. And control seems to be very important to your former guardian," Elder Lysithea added dryly. By the end of the week, 12 more bindings had been removed, bringing the total to 19. Each removal left Harry feeling simultaneously stronger and more vulnerable, as if layers of armor were being stripped away to reveal both power and sensitivity beneath. The physical changes were becoming noticeable. He'd grown nearly 2 inches already, his body beginning to fill out with proper nutrition and the removal of growth-suppressing bindings. His vision had improved to the point that he no longer needed his glasses except for reading small print. His hair, always unruly, now had a subtle gleam to it that caught the light when he moved. The mental and emotional changes were even more profound. Harry found himself questioning things more readily, trusting his own perceptions where before he might have deferred to authority. His memory was sharper, connections forming more quickly between ideas. And his emotions, always muted at the Dursleys as a survival tactic, now flowed more freely. He found himself laughing at Gabrielle's antics, engaging in spirited debates with Fleur about magical theory, and occasionally retreating to his room when the day's experiences became overwhelming. "It's normal to feel raw," Fleur assured him during one such moment, finding him on his balcony watching the sunset over the sanctuary's lake. "Your mind and magic are relearning how to process everything without artificial constraints." Harry nodded, grateful for her understanding. Over the past week, Fleur had become something between a guide and a friend, her initial reserve giving way to a wry humor and fierce intelligence he'd come to value. "I received another letter from my friends at Beauxbatons today," she mentioned, leaning against the balcony railing beside him. "They're full of questions about you." Harry groaned. "The famous Harry Potter. Is there anywhere I'm not a curiosity?" "Perhaps Antarctica," Fleur suggested with a small smile. "Though the magical research station there might still recognize your name." "Brilliant." Harry sighed. "What did you tell them?" "That you are recovering from medical issues and wish for privacy." Fleur shrugged. "It has the benefit of being true without revealing details." Harry appreciated her discretion. Though he was gradually accepting his unusual situation, he wasn't ready to become a public figure in yet another community. "My mother says your godfather's hearing is tomorrow," Fleur mentioned after a comfortable silence. "She'll attend as a diplomatic observer for the Veela Nation." "I wish I could be there," Harry said, surprising himself with the realization. "I don't know him, but he's a connection to my parents. And if he's been wrongfully imprisoned all this time because of me, not because of you," Fleur corrected firmly. "Because of Dumbledore's manipulations and the Ministry's incompetence." "You were a baby, Harry." Harry nodded, though the guilt was harder to dismiss than the logical argument against it. "Still. I wish I could see him cleared in person." "The healers say you won't be strong enough for international travel for at least another month," Fleur reminded him. "But perhaps, if the hearing goes well, he could visit you here." "Do you think your mother would allow that?" Harry asked hopefully. "I'm certain she would. She believes family connections are important for healing." Fleur looked at him curiously. "Are you nervous about meeting him?" "Terrified," Harry admitted. "What if he doesn't like me? Or I don't like him?" What if he expects me to be like my father, and I'm not? What if the lake suddenly turns to chocolate and Gabrielle eats it all? Fleur countered with a raised eyebrow. Imagining disasters helps nothing. Her pragmatic response startled a laugh from Harry. Fair point. Besides, she added more gently, anyone who survived 9 years in Azkaban holding on to his innocence must possess extraordinary strength of character. Such a person wouldn't reject his godson for something as trivial as personality differences. Harry considered this perspective. I suppose you're right. I usually am, Fleur replied with a touch of her characteristic haughtiness, though her eyes sparkled with humor. Now come, dinner will be served soon, and Gabrielle is planning to interrogate you about flying on a broomstick. Apparently, she's decided you must be an expert, being British. I've never even seen a broomstick, let alone flown one, Harry protested as they left the balcony. Then you shall have the pleasure of disappointing an 8-year-old, Fleur said cheerfully. Consider it practice for future fame-related interactions. The light banter carried them to dinner, where, as predicted, Gabrielle peppered Harry with questions about Quidditch and flying. Despite knowing almost nothing about either topic, Harry found himself enjoying the young girl's enthusiasm and Fleur's occasional eye rolls at her sister's more outlandish queries. It was, Harry realized with a start, the closest thing to a normal family dinner he had ever experienced. The thought brought a lump to his throat that he quickly disguised by taking a large drink of water. Later that night, as he lay in bed watching moonlight pattern the ceiling of his room, Harry reflected on how drastically his life had changed in just over a week. From a cupboard under the stairs to a suite in a hidden sanctuary. From unwanted burden to valued kin. From ignorance to the beginnings of understanding. And tomorrow, perhaps, his godfather would regain his freedom. Another piece of the puzzle of Harry's past falling into place. With that hopeful thought, he drifted into sleep, dreaming not of green light and screams, but of golden flames and protective wings. The courtroom fell absolutely silent as Sirius Black finished his testimony under Veritasium. Apollon Delacour, seated in the diplomatic observation section, noted the varying expressions of shock, horror, and dismay among the members of the Wizengamot. Black sat slumped in the witness chair, the effects of the truth serum still evident in his slack features and unfocused gaze. Despite 9 years in Azkaban, the heir to House Black retained a ghost of his former handsome features, though his face was gaunt and his once elegant black hair hung in matted tangles around his shoulders. Administer the antidote, Amelia Bones instructed the court potioneer, her monocle glinting in the torchlight as she surveyed the chamber with a flinty expression. As the antidote took effect, Black straightened slightly, awareness returning to his gray eyes. He looked around the courtroom as if seeing it for the first time, his gaze eventually settling on Albus Dumbledore, who sat among the Wizengamot members with an expression of grave concern that didn't quite reach his eyes. Let the record show, Amelia continued crisply, that under ministry-approved Veritasium, Sirius Black has testified to the following: he was not the secret keeper for James and Lily Potter. Peter Pettigrew held that role. After discovering the Potters' deaths, Black pursued Pettigrew, who faked his own murder, killed 12 muggles with a blasting curse, and escaped in his unregistered Rat-Animagus form. Black was then arrested by Aurors and imprisoned in Azkaban without formal charges or trial. She turned to face the Wizengamot directly. Furthermore, Mr. Black has testified that as Harry Potter's sworn godfather, he attempted repeatedly to assert his guardianship rights from prison but received no response to his petitions. Given these facts, I move for immediate dismissal of all allegations against Sirius Black and his immediate release with full restoration of rights and appropriate compensation for wrongful imprisonment. Bartemius Crouch Sr., looking pale and diminished in his seat near the prosecutor's table, made no objection. As the primary architect of Black's imprisonment during the post-war chaos, he now faced serious questions about his judgment and adherence to legal procedure. Those in favor? Dumbledore called, raising his own wand with the illuminated tip that indicated an affirmative vote. Nearly every wand in the Wizengamot rose. Only a few of the most conservative members, those with known Death Eater connections, abstained. The motion carries, Dumbledore declared. Sirius Black, you are hereby cleared of all charges and released from custody. The Ministry extends its most sincere apologies for this miscarriage of justice. Arrangements for compensation will be addressed in a separate hearing. Black's laugh held little humor. 9 years of my life. My godson raised by Lily's magic-hating sister instead of me. James and Lily's betrayer free all this time. He shook his head. But sure, let's discuss compensation later. Mr. Black, Amelia interjected before the situation could deteriorate, there have been significant developments regarding your godson's situation that we should discuss privately. Black's attention snapped to her. What's happened to Harry? Is he all right? He is safe and well, Apollon spoke up, rising from her seat. But no longer residing with Petunia Dursley. All eyes turned to the striking Veela ambassador. Who are you? Black demanded, then winced at his own rudeness. Forgive me. Azkaban does little for social graces. Ambassador Apollon Delacour of the Veela Nation, she introduced herself with a slight bow. Your godson is currently under our protection, having been granted asylum after the discovery of numerous illegal magical bindings placed upon him. Bindings? Black repeated, confusion giving way to alarm. What bindings? Who placed them? Apollon's gaze shifted briefly to Dumbledore, who maintained his composed expression despite the clear accusation. Perhaps we should continue this discussion in more private surroundings, Amelia suggested, noting the journalists frantically taking notes in the public gallery. Rita Skeeter in particular looked as though Christmas had arrived early. I agree, Apollon said smoothly. Lord Black, if you would accompany us to the diplomatic conference room. I have brought letters from your godson and can explain his current situation in detail. Black stood shakily, still weak from years of Dementor exposure and poor nutrition. Lead the way, Ambassador. Nothing could keep me from information about Harry right now. As they exited the courtroom, Apollon noted Dumbledore attempting to join their party. With a subtle gesture to the diplomatic security wizards flanking the corridor, she ensured he was politely but firmly redirected. Chief Warlock, one of the security wizards said respectfully, the diplomatic wing requires specific clearance today due to the sensitive nature of ongoing negotiations. Perhaps Director Bones can brief you later. Dumbledore's momentary expression of frustration was quickly masked by his customary benign smile. Of course, of course. Another time, then. Apollon suppressed a smile of her own. The chief warlock was discovering that his usual methods of inserting himself into every significant conversation were less effective under international diplomatic protocols. In the conference room, Sirius Black practically collapsed into the nearest chair, his brief show of strength in the courtroom having depleted his reserves. Here, Apollon said kindly, offering him a potion from her bag. A restorative. It will help with the after-effects of the Veritaserum and provide some energy. Black eyed the potion suspiciously, a healthy reflex, Apollon thought, for someone so recently released from wrongful imprisonment. It's sealed with the Veela Nation's diplomatic emblem, she pointed out. Tampering would be magically evident. After examining the seal, Black drank the potion in one swift motion. Color returned to his pale face almost immediately. Now, he said, setting down the empty vial, tell me about my godson. Where is he? What are these bindings you mentioned? And why is he with the Veela, of all people? One question at a time, Lord Black, Apollon replied, seating herself across from him. First, Harry is safe and recovering at our primary sanctuary. He is receiving the best healing care available for the removal of 88 separate magical bindings placed upon him between the ages of 15 months and 9 years. 88. Black's voice rose in shock. That's not just illegal, it's monstrous. Who would do such a thing to a child? Primarily Albus Dumbledore, Amelia Bones answered, her expression grim. Though some appear to have been placed by ministry officials acting under his direction. Black's face darkened with fury. Dumbledore? The same man who sent Hagrid to take Harry from me that night. Who insisted the boy would be safer with Lily's sister than his rightful guardian. The very same, Apollon confirmed. As for why Harry is with us. She hesitated, considering how to explain this aspect delicately. Are you aware that Lily Evans Potter had non-human ancestry? Black's brow furrowed. There were rumors in school. Something about her mother's family having creature blood. James looked into it once, thinking it might explain her unusual magical talents, but never found anything concrete. The inheritance test performed at Gringotts revealed that Lily descended from the Argentum line of the Veela Nation, Apollon explained. A connection deliberately obscured over generations but still magically active. Harry has inherited this heritage, and one of the bindings specifically suppressed its expression. Lily was part Veela. Black shook his head in wonder. That, actually explains a lot. The way her temper could literally make the air heat up around her. Indeed. Apollon smiled at this confirmation of Veela traits. When the goblins discovered this heritage and the illegal bindings, they contacted us immediately. Under international magical law, we had both the right and the obligation to offer asylum to a kinsman suffering magical suppression. And Harry accepted? Black asked, a hint of hurt in his voice. He had little reason to remain, Apollon replied gently. His life with the Dursleys was less than ideal. They kept him in a cupboard, Lord Black. Treated him as a servant. Told him his parents died in a car crash and that he was an unwanted burden. Black's expression transformed from hurt to horror to cold fury in the span of seconds. A cupboard? They told him James and Lily died in a car crash. His magic flared visibly around him, rattling the cups on the conference table. I'll kill them. No, first I'll make them suffer, then I'll kill them. While I understand the sentiment, Amelia interjected firmly, I must remind you that you've only just been cleared of one murder charge. Perhaps pursuing legal remedies would be wiser. The Dursleys will face consequences, Apollon assured him. Both magical and mundane authorities have been notified of their mistreatment. But Harry's immediate needs took priority. Taking a deep breath, Black visibly struggled to control his anger. You mentioned letters from Harry? Yes. Apollon removed an envelope from her diplomatic pouch. He was quite excited to write to you once he learned of your existence. Another fact Dumbledore had concealed from him. Black took the envelope with trembling hands, breaking the seal with careful movements. As he read the letter, written in Harry's neat but still childish hand, his eyes filled with tears. He wants to meet me, Black said, his voice rough with emotion. He doesn't blame me for not being there. Harry is a remarkably compassionate child, despite everything he's endured, Apollon observed. The healers believe this quality is innate rather than a result of his upbringing, a core aspect of his personality that couldn't be suppressed even by Dumbledore's bindings. When can I see him? Black asked, carefully refolding the letter. That depends on your own recovery needs and Harry's healing schedule, Apollon replied. The removal of the bindings is a delicate process that cannot be rushed. However, if you wish to write back immediately, I can ensure he receives your letter today. Yes, please. Black looked around. Could I have parchment and a quill? Amelia provided the requested items, and for several minutes, the only sound in the room was the scratch of quill on parchment as Black composed his response. Apollon noted that despite his weakened state, he wrote with the elegant penmanship typical of pure-blood heirs, some training too deeply ingrained to be erased even by Azkaban. Will Dumbledore be allowed to interfere with Harry again? Black asked as he sealed his letter. Legally, no, Amelia replied. The ICW has recognized the Veela Nation's Asylum claim as valid based on the evidence of magical bindings. Even as Chief Warlock, Dumbledore cannot override international magical law. But he will try other avenues, Apollon added realistically. He has already attempted to send messages to Harry, ostensibly to explain misunderstandings. These have been intercepted and archived as evidence of continued interference. I want to help protect Harry, Black said firmly. As his godfather and the head of House Black, I have resources and political influence that could be useful. Your support would indeed strengthen Harry's position, Apollon agreed. Once you've had time to recover and reclaim your place in society, we would welcome your involvement in Harry's life, to whatever extent he desires. And what does he desire? Black asked, vulnerability showing through his determined expression. After all this time, I'm a stranger to him. He wants to know you, Apollon assured him. To hear about his parents from someone who loved them. To understand the connection you share. She paused before adding gently, but he's also cautious about new attachments after so much betrayal. Give him time, Lord Black. He needs to learn to trust his own judgment again. Black nodded, understanding in his gray eyes. I've waited 9 years. I can wait a bit longer to do this right. He handed his sealed letter back to Apollon. Please tell Harry that whenever and however he wants to meet, I'll be there. On his terms. I will convey that message, Apollon promised, tucking the letter into her diplomatic pouch. Now, regarding your own situation, where will you go upon release? You'll need time and proper care to recover from your ordeal. I hadn't thought that far, Black admitted. Grimmauld Place is the ancestral Black home, but it's a grim pit of dark magic and bad memories. I wouldn't recover there, I'd regress. St. Mungo's has a private rehabilitation facility for cases of magical trauma, Amelia suggested. Given the circumstances of your imprisonment, the ministry would cover all expenses as part of your initial compensation. A hospital setting might be best initially, Apollon agreed. The Dementor exposure will have affected you magically as well as physically and emotionally. Specialized care would speed your recovery. Black looked ready to argue but then sagged slightly, reality seemingly catching up with him. You're probably right. I'm not much use to Harry or anyone else in this state. He straightened, some of his old determination returning. 2 weeks. I'll give the healers 2 weeks to get me back on my feet. Then I start rebuilding my life and helping my godson. A reasonable timeline, Amelia nodded. I'll make the arrangements immediately. As they concluded their meeting, Apollon reflected on the contrast between the two men who claimed to have Harry Potter's best interests at heart. Dumbledore, with all his power and influence, had bound and controlled the boy, shaping him towards some predetermined destiny. Black, fresh from unimaginable suffering, thought only of what Harry might need from him. The choice between them seemed clear. Apollon only hoped the rest of magical Britain would eventually see it as clearly. Harry's transformation accelerated over the following weeks as more bindings were carefully removed. By the 1-month mark of his stay at the sanctuary, 37 of the 88 bindings had been released, leaving him with greater magical and emotional freedom than he had ever known. The physical changes were now unmistakable. He had grown nearly 4 inches, his body filling out with proper nutrition and exercise. His hair, while still untamable, now had the subtle silver highlights characteristic of Veela heritage when caught in certain light. His green eyes occasionally flashed with golden fire when his emotions ran high. Most noticeably, his movements had gained a natural grace that belied his years of awkward, restricted motion under the Dursleys' care. But the internal changes were even more significant. Harry's magical abilities had blossomed, revealing natural talents in protective magic, elemental manipulation, and intuitive casting. Under the guidance of the sanctuary's teachers, he began learning to control and direct these abilities, not through rigid wand movements and incantations like British wizards, but through intent, visualization, and emotional focus. The wand is a channel, not the source, his primary instructor, Master Paralis, explained during one lesson. Your magic comes from within. The wand merely helps you direct it until you learn finer control. Harry flourished under this approach, finding it far more natural than the snippets of wand lore he'd gleaned from books about Hogwarts. By his 5th week at the sanctuary, he could conjure and manipulate small flames without a wand, create basic shields against minor hexes, and perform simple charms with less rigid movements than standard wizarding technique required. His correspondence with Sirius had developed into a genuine relationship through increasingly personal letters. His godfather, now residing in a private cottage in the Scottish Highlands while completing his recovery, shared stories of James and Lily that filled gaps in Harry's knowledge of his parents. Through Sirius's vivid descriptions, Harry began to form a real sense of who his parents had been, not just martyrs or names, but people with strengths, flaws, dreams, and quirks. "Your father could transform into a stag," Sirius wrote in one letter. An animagus form he achieved at just 15, illegally, I might add, though the statute of limitations has long expired on that particular misadventure. "He did it to keep me company during my transformations," a loyalty typical of James. "Your mother, when she finally stopped wanting to hex us all into next week, proved to have a mischievous streak that rivaled our own, though she channeled it more productively. She once enchanted all the suits of armor on the third floor to recite poetry whenever Professor McGonagall passed by, specifically, romantic Scottish ballads that made even our stern head of house blush." These glimpses into his parents' lives were precious to Harry, creating connections to his heritage that complemented what he was learning about his Veela ancestry. Between Sirius's letters and the sanctuary's records, Harry began piecing together a more complete picture of who he was and where he came from. His friendship with Fleur had deepened as well, evolving from her initial role as guide to a genuine partnership. 3 years his senior, she treated him neither as a child to be coddled nor as the famous boy who lived, but simply as Harry, sometimes annoying, often interesting, occasionally impressive in his determination. They bickered, laughed, studied, and explored the sanctuary together, with Fleur introducing Harry to magical concepts beyond his years and Harry challenging her preconceptions with his unique perspectives. "You think too linearly," she complained during one study session, when Harry questioned her approach to a particularly complex charm. "This isn't potions with its precise measurements and rigid sequences." "And you rely too much on intuition," he countered. "Sometimes understanding the structure matters." They'd glared at each other momentarily before bursting into laughter at their mutual stubbornness. It was during one such study session, as August drew to a close, that Apollon found them in the sanctuary's library, surrounded by books on magical theory and history. "Am I interrupting scholarly pursuits?" she asked with amusement, noting the animated debate in progress. "Harry insists on understanding why a spell works before trying to cast it," Fleur explained with exaggerated patience. "I'm trying to explain that sometimes you must feel the magic first, then analyze it." "Both approaches have merit," Apollon observed diplomatically. "But perhaps you could pause your methodological dispute. I have news that concerns you both." Harry and Fleur exchanged glances before setting aside their books. "Is it about Sirius's visit?" Harry asked eagerly. His godfather was scheduled to visit the sanctuary the following week, once the healers had cleared him for international magical travel. "That remains on schedule," Apollon assured him. "But this concerns another matter. I've received communication from Albus Dumbledore regarding the upcoming school year." Harry's expression immediately closed off. Despite weeks of healing, any mention of Dumbledore still triggered a defensive reaction. "What does he want now?" "Ostensibly, to ensure you receive proper magical education," Apollon replied, taking a seat across from them. "He has sent your Hogwarts acceptance letter, along with assurances that your special circumstances would be accommodated." "I'm not going to Hogwarts," Harry said flatly. "Not where he can get to me." "And we have no intention of sending you there," Apollon agreed smoothly. "However, this raises the question of your formal magical education. While the sanctuary's teachings are invaluable, particularly for your Veela heritage, you will eventually need standardized instruction certified by the ICW. Beaux batons, Fleur suggested immediately. "Our school has a diverse student body, including part Veela and other beings. The curriculum is more balanced than Hogwarts, with less emphasis on arbitrary divisions between light and dark magic." "That is one excellent option," Apollon agreed. Madame Maxime, the headmistress, has already indicated she would welcome Harry's enrollment when he feels ready. When I feel ready? Harry repeated, surprised by the qualification. The healers advise against rushing your entry into a structured educational environment, Apollon explained. The removal of the remaining bindings will continue for several more months, and your magic is still stabilizing. They recommend completing at least the first phase of your healing before beginning formal schooling. So I wouldn't start until next year? Harry asked, conflicted emotions evident in his voice. While not eager to leave the sanctuary's safety, he was curious about experiencing a proper school. Not necessarily, Apollon replied. There is another option. Beauxbatons offers a correspondence program for students with special circumstances, those with health concerns, unique magical conditions, or diplomatic situations like yours. You would study the first-year curriculum here under qualified tutors, with quarterly assessments at Beauxbatons itself. Then, when the healers determine you're ready, you could transition to full attendance. That sounds perfect, Harry said, relief evident in his voice. I could continue healing and still keep up with my education. And I could help, Fleur added. I'll be starting my 4th year, but I remember the first-year material well. Your assistance would be welcome, Apollon agreed, though we would also engage proper tutors for the standard subjects. She turned back to Harry. There's one more thing. Sirius has offered to cover all expenses related to your education, including tutors, materials, and eventual boarding fees. He doesn't need to do that, Harry protested. The goblins showed me the Potter accounts. I have more than enough. It's not about need, Harry, Apollon explained gently. It's about his desire to fulfill his role as godfather. This is important to him. Harry considered this perspective. I'll discuss it with him when he visits. A reasonable approach, Apollon approved. Now, shall I respond to Dumbledore's letter with a formal declining of the Hogwarts position, or would you prefer to wait until after Sirius's visit to make a final decision? Decline it, Harry said without hesitation. Even if I don't choose Beauxbatons, I won't be going to Hogwarts. Not with him in charge. Apollon nodded, unsurprised by his decision. Very well. I'll prepare the formal response today. The magical contract of the acceptance letter will dissolve once an alternative ICW-accredited education is confirmed. After Apollon departed, Fleur studied Harry's expression. Are you disappointed? About not attending Hogwarts, I mean. It was your parents' school, after all. Harry considered the question seriously. A bit, he admitted. Before all this, when I didn't know about magic, Hogwarts would have seemed like a dream come true, any escape from the Dursleys would have been. But now. He shrugged. I can't separate Hogwarts from Dumbledore in my mind. And I can't trust myself around him yet. Can't trust yourself? Fleur repeated, curious. With these bindings being removed, I'm still learning to control my emotions, my magic, Harry explained. If I saw him, knowing what he did to me, what he took from me. He closed his eyes briefly, centering himself as his healing instructor had taught him. I don't know that I could contain my reaction. And losing control around someone that powerful would be dangerous. Wise, Fleur acknowledged. Self-awareness is rare in someone your age. I've had good teachers, Harry replied with a small smile. Including one particularly stubborn Veela who insists I think about why spells work. Fleur huffed in mock offense, but her eyes sparkled with humor. Perhaps if you spent less time arguing and more time practicing. Their friendly bickering resumed as they returned to their studies, but Harry's mind occasionally drifted to thoughts of Hogwarts, the castle his parents had called home, the place where they had met and grown up. Someday, he thought, he might visit. But not as a student. Not under Dumbledore's watchful eye and subtle control. That path had closed the moment the goblins had revealed those 88 binding spells. His future lay elsewhere now. With the Veela who had claimed him as kin. With Sirius, once their relationship developed further. Perhaps at Beauxbatons, with its more inclusive approach to magical beings. For the first time in his life, Harry Potter had choices, real choices, not the illusions of choice offered by those who sought to control him. And that, he decided, was worth more than any magical castle, no matter how historic or significant to his parents' story. His story would be different. And it would be his own. In a secure chamber deep within the Department of Mysteries, unspeakable Croaker examined the crystal container delivered from Gringotts with growing alarm. The black, oily substance within writhed against its confines, occasionally forming shapes reminiscent of a human face in silent screams. "You're certain this was extracted from the Potter boy's scar?" he asked the Goblin representative who had delivered it. "Absolutely certain," the Goblin confirmed. "During the first binding removal procedure. The senior healer captured it immediately." Croaker nodded grimly. His preliminary tests confirmed his worst fears. This is a soul fragment. Specifically, a Horcrux. The Goblin's expression darkened. "As we suspected. Will you inform the DMLE?" "Not yet. This has broader implications that require investigation before involving law enforcement." Croaker carefully placed the container in a specially warded cabinet. "Please convey our thanks to the Veela healers. Their swift action likely saved the boy from permanent corruption." After the Goblin departed, Croaker activated a complex series of runes on his office floor. A shimmering portal appeared, through which stepped a witch in the distinctive robes of the Unspeakable's counterparts in France's Department of Mysteries. "It's confirmed," Croaker said without preamble. "Voldemort created at least one Horcrux, and it was somehow attached to Harry Potter's scar." The French Unspeakable's eyes widened. "Then the rumors of his disembodied survival may have merit." "Indeed. And if he made one Horcrux?" "He likely made more," she finished grimly. "The British Dark Lord could still return." "We need to establish an international task force," Croaker decided. Quietly. "Outside the influence of political figures like Dumbledore or Fudge." "Agreed. I'll contact our counterparts in other ministries." She paused before adding, "And the boy? Potter? Should he be informed?" Croaker considered this question carefully. "Not yet. He's undergoing significant healing already. But the Veela should be advised to check for any residual dark influence. And his godfather, Black, once he's recovered sufficiently, he might be a valuable ally in this matter." The French Unspeakable nodded. "I'll arrange discreet communication through appropriate channels." After she departed, Croaker stared at the cabinet containing the Horcrux fragment. The implications were staggering. Had Dumbledore known what resided in Potter's scar? Was that the reason for some of those bindings, an attempt to contain the dark influence? Or had the chief warlock been genuinely unaware, his motivations for controlling the boy stemming from the prophecy alone? Either possibility was troubling. But the most disturbing question remained: how many more of these abominations had Voldemort created, and where were they hidden? The answer, Croaker suspected, would determine whether the brief peace the wizarding world had enjoyed was merely an intermission in a war that had never truly ended. Chapter 3, Rising from Ashes. Nervous energy coursed through Harry as he paced the stone terrace overlooking the sanctuary's central gardens. Today was the day Sirius would arrive, his godfather, in the flesh, not just through letters and small magical photographs. The man who had loved his parents. The man who had suffered 9 years of unjust imprisonment in the worst prison in magical Britain. What would Sirius think of him? Would he measure up to whatever expectations his godfather might have? Would Sirius see James in him and be disappointed by the differences? Or worse, would he see the fractured, healing child still struggling to understand his own magic and identity? "If you continue pacing like that, you'll wear a trench in the stonework," Fleur observed from her perch on the balustrade. "He's not due for another hour." Harry paused, running a hand through his unruly hair, a nervous habit he'd developed since gaining the freedom to move naturally. "I know. I just can't seem to sit still." "Understandable," she conceded, her expression softening. But wearing yourself out with worry won't make the meeting go better. What if he doesn't like who I am now? Harry finally voiced his deepest fear. He knew my parents. He'll expect me to be like them. Fleur slid gracefully from the balustrade and approached him. Harry, this man has written you 27 letters in 6 weeks. He has inquired about your health, your interests, your recovery, and your future. Not once has he compared you to your parents except to point out traits you inherited that he admires. I know, but nothing, she interrupted firmly. From everything we've seen, Sirius Black wants to know you, not some replica of your father or mother. Harry nodded, though the knot in his stomach remained. 6 weeks of healing had improved his confidence greatly but had also awakened emotions long suppressed by Dumbledore's bindings. Anxiety, sharp and insistent, was one such unwelcome guest. Come, Fleur said, taking his arm. Let's walk through the eastern gardens. The new blooms have opened, and the distraction will do you good. Harry allowed himself to be led away from the arrival terrace. The eastern gardens were his favorite part of the sanctuary, where magical plants from across the world grew in harmonious arrangements. Flowers that changed color with the viewer's mood, trees that whispered ancient secrets in forgotten languages, shrubs whose berries could heal minor wounds or grant temporary enhancement to various senses, all thrived in the perfect climate of Verelium. Have you finished the Transfiguration primer? Fleur asked as they walked, deliberately shifting the conversation to academic matters. Mostly. The theory makes sense, but I'm still working on visualizing the complete transformation rather than just the end result. Harry gratefully followed her conversational lead. Professor Lumira says my approach is too linear, that I need to conceptualize the entire process as a single magical event. She's right, Fleur nodded. It's like trying to see a river instead of individual drops of water. The transformation happens continuously, not in steps. They continued discussing magical theory, Fleur skillfully keeping Harry engaged in the complex topic until his anxiety gradually subsided. By the time they circled back toward the arrival terrace, he felt more centered, his breathing even and his thoughts clearer. Thank you, he said simply as they approached the stone steps leading back up to the terrace. Fleur's smile was understanding. That's what friends do, yes. Besides, your magic was starting to make the air uncomfortably warm. I prefer not to have my eyebrows singed off before meeting your famous godfather. Harry chuckled, only now noticing the subtle shimmer of heat that had been surrounding him, another manifestation of his Veela heritage that emerged during emotional distress. With a conscious effort, he calmed the instinctive fire magic, cooling the air around them. Better, Fleur approved. Though you're getting better at controlling it. 2 weeks ago, you would have set those bushes aflame without noticing. Progress, Harry agreed wryly. Then he stiffened, his recently enhanced magical senses detecting a new presence approaching the sanctuary's outer wards. Someone's coming. Fleur raised an eyebrow, impressed by his perception. Already? He's early. They hurried back to the arrival terrace where Apollon Delacour already stood with Elder Thalassa, prepared to greet their visitor. The diplomatic portkey arrival point glowed with golden light as the sanctuary's magic recognized and admitted a pre-approved visitor. With a soft flash, Sirius Black appeared. Harry's first impression was of a man caught between past and present. Sirius was tall and still too thin, though much healthier than in the newspaper photographs from his release. His black hair was cut shorter now, revealing aristocratic features that hinted at his handsome youth despite the lingering gauntness. He wore fine robes of deep blue, new, but classically styled, and carried himself with the straight-backed bearing of a pure-blood heir, though there was a wariness in his movements that spoke of hard-learned caution. But it was his eyes that captured Harry's attention. Gray and intense, they scanned the terrace swiftly before locking onto Harry with such naked hope and emotion that Harry felt his breath catch. Harry, Sirius breathed, his voice rough with feeling. For a moment, neither moved, both frozen in the weight of the moment. Then Apollon gently nudged Harry forward, breaking the spell. Harry stepped toward his godfather, his prepared greetings forgotten. "You came," he said simply. "Wild hippogriffs couldn't have kept me away," Sirius replied with a hint of a smile that transformed his austere features. He hesitated, then opened his arms slightly. "May I?" Harry closed the distance between them and found himself enveloped in a careful embrace, as if Sirius feared he might break if held too tightly. After a moment's stiffness, Harry returned the hug, something long frozen inside him beginning to thaw at this simple act of affection freely given. When they separated, both had suspiciously bright eyes. "Let me look at you," Sirius said, holding Harry at arm's length. "Merlin's beard, you've changed even from the photographs Ambassador Delacour sent. You're taller." "Another binding removal last week," Harry explained, suddenly self-conscious. "It was suppressing my physical development." A flash of anger crossed Sirius's face before he visibly controlled it. "Well, you look healthier than I've seen you yet. Less like James than I expected, actually. Is that disappointing?" Harry couldn't help asking. "Not at all," Sirius assured him firmly. "You're your own person, Harry. That's exactly as it should be." His smile turned wry. "Though those eyes are pure lily. She'd be pleased they're the feature you carry most prominently." The simple, genuine way Sirius spoke of his parents, without the reverence of legend or the dismissiveness of the Dursleys, eased something in Harry's chest. Here, finally, was someone who had known them as people. Lord Black, Apollon stepped forward. "Welcome to Verelion. We're honored by your presence." "The honor is mine, Ambassador," Sirius replied with formal courtesy, though his eyes kept darting back to Harry as if he feared his godson might vanish. "And please, it's just Sirius. I've had enough formality these past weeks to last a lifetime." "Very well, Sirius," Apollon smiled. "May I present Elder Thalassa of the Council of Elders, and my daughter Fleur, who has become a good friend to your godson." Sirius bowed respectfully to the elder, then turned to Fleur with a curious expression. "Miss Delacour. Harry has mentioned you often in his letters. Thank you for helping him adjust to his new circumstances." Fleur inclined her head gracefully. "Harry makes it easy to be a friend. His perspective is refreshing." "That's a diplomatic way of saying I ask too many questions," Harry explained with a small grin. "I'd expect nothing less from Lily Evans' son," Sirius chuckled. "She questioned everything too. Drove her professors mad." These casual references to his mother, not as a martyr or a magical protection, but as a real person with habits and traits, were precious to Harry. Each one felt like a small gift, filling gaps in his understanding of himself. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more comfortable," Elder Thalassa suggested. "The Eastern Pavilion has been prepared for your reunion." They made their way through the gardens to a beautiful open-sided structure overlooking the sanctuary's central lake. Refreshments awaited them, a light meal with both British and French selections, a thoughtful touch that Harry appreciated on Sirius's behalf. As they settled around the table, Harry noticed Sirius studying him with a mixture of joy and concern. "You're looking at me like you're trying to solve a puzzle," he observed. Sirius's bark of laughter was startlingly genuine. "Sorry, pup. I'm trying not to stare, but it's difficult. When I last saw you, you were a toddler trying to ride your toy broomstick into the kitchen to steal biscuits." "I don't remember that," Harry said wistfully. "No, you wouldn't. You were barely 15 months old." Sirius's expression grew serious. "Harry, there's something important I need to say before we go any further." Harry tensed slightly, bracing himself. "I failed you," Sirius said quietly, raw honesty in every word. "I should have been there for you all these years. Instead, I let anger cloud my judgment. I went after Pettigrew instead of securing your safety first. It was unforgivable, and yet I'm asking for your forgiveness anyway." The naked vulnerability in his godfather's expression stunned Harry. This was not the confident, joking man from the letters, nor the aristocratic Lord Black who had arrived on the terrace. This was simply Sirius, damaged, remorseful, and desperately hoping for connection. "There's nothing to forgive," Harry said finally. "You thought you were doing the right thing. And then they took away your chance to make it right." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Besides, I'm not sure anyone could have protected me from Dumbledore then. He seems to get what he wants." "Not anymore," Sirius said, steel entering his voice. "Not where you're concerned." The conversation shifted to lighter topics after that, Sirius sharing stories of his healing process, Harry describing life at the sanctuary, with Apollon, Elder Thalassa, and Fleur occasionally adding context or clarification. As the afternoon progressed, Harry felt the last of his nervousness fade, replaced by a growing certainty that this connection with Sirius was right and real. When Apollon tactfully suggested that Harry might like to show Sirius his favorite places in the sanctuary, Harry eagerly agreed. The opportunity to speak more privately with his godfather was welcome. As they walked along the lakeshore, Sirius visibly relaxed further, his movements becoming less stiff and formal. "This place is remarkable," he observed, gesturing to the sanctuary spread before them. "Nothing like what I expected from the Veela." "What did you expect?" Harry asked curiously. "Something more. I don't know, hedonistic? Seductive?" Sirius admitted with a self-deprecating smile. "The wizarding world stereotypes about Veela are rather one-dimensional." "I've noticed," Harry said dryly. "Some of the books Fleur showed me from her schooling are embarrassingly wrong about Veela culture. It's all about the allure and fire-throwing, nothing about their healing traditions or diplomatic history." "Speaking of healing," Sirius said, his tone carefully neutral, "how are you really doing with all this, Harry? The binding removals, discovering your heritage, being thrust into a completely new culture." Harry considered the question seriously. "It's been overwhelming," he admitted. "Sometimes I feel like I'm learning to be a whole new person. Or maybe discovering who I was supposed to be all along." He paused at the water's edge, watching the play of light on the lake's surface. "But it feels right. Like I'm finally moving in the direction I should have been going all my life." Sirius nodded, understanding in his eyes. "And the bindings? The healers say you've had about half removed now." 43 out of 88, Harry confirmed. "They're removing them in careful sequences. The most dangerous ones are gone now, but some of the more subtle ones remain, things affecting specific magical affinities or personality traits." "Is it painful?" Sirius asked, his concern evident. "Sometimes," Harry acknowledged. "But it's worth it. Each removal feels like taking off a too tight shoe I didn't even realize was pinching." He flexed his hands unconsciously. "My magic flows differently now. More naturally. And I can feel things, emotions, connections, magical signatures, that I never could before." Sirius watched him with a mixture of pride and sadness. "You deserve to grow up knowing all this, Harry. To discover your magic gradually, naturally. Not to have it bound and then suddenly released." "Maybe," Harry agreed. "But I'm learning to work with what I have, not what might have been." He turned to face his godfather directly. "What about you? Are you really recovering from Azkaban, or are you just saying you are in your letters?" Sirius looked momentarily startled by the direct question, then laughed. "Straight to the point, just like your mother." He sobered. "I'm better than I was, certainly. The private healing facility helped stabilize my magic and begin addressing the Dementor exposure. But..." He sighed. "It's not something that just goes away, Harry. I have nightmares. Moments where I lose track of time or place. Triggers that send me back there in my mind." "But you're fighting it," Harry observed. "With everything I have," Sirius confirmed. "I have too much to live for now to let Azkaban keep any part of me." He hesitated before adding, "including you, if you'll have me in your life." "I'd like that," Harry said simply. I don't know exactly what that looks like yet, but I want to find out. Relief washed over Sirius's features. That's all I can ask for. He glanced around the beautiful sanctuary. Though I understand why you're happy here. It's peaceful. Safe. It is, Harry agreed. But I know I can't stay forever. The outside world is still out there, and eventually, I'll need to face it. Not alone, Sirius said firmly. Whatever you decide about your future, I'll support you. Whether that's bows batons or private tutoring or something else entirely. I've been accepted to Bowsbaden's correspondence program for now, Harry explained. I'll study the first-year curriculum here with tutors, and then transition to the school itself when the healers think I'm ready. A sensible approach, Sirius approved. Bows batons has an excellent reputation, especially for charm work and magical theory. He hesitated before asking, and what about Hogwarts? Have you completely ruled it out? While Dumbledore is headmaster? Yes, Harry replied without hesitation. I can't trust myself around him yet. The anger when I think about what he did to me. He glanced down to find his hands glowing faintly with suppressed fire magic and took a calming breath. I'm still learning to control these new abilities. Putting myself in his reach would be dangerous for everyone. Sirius nodded, his expression serious. I understand. And I agree, for what it's worth. Dumbledore's influence at Hogwarts is too pervasive for you to truly be beyond his reach there. He smiled slightly. Besides, I attended Bows batons briefly myself, did you know that? No. Harry looked at him in surprise. You never mentioned that. It was only for a semester in my 5th year. My mother had discovered my friendship with your father, a Potter and known blood traitor, and temporarily pulled me from Hogwarts as punishment. Sirius shook his head at the memory. She thought the French aristocracy's influence would straighten me out. Instead, I learned 17 new swear words, developed a taste for fine wines that horrified her puritanical sensibilities, and returned to Hogwarts with even more progressive ideas than before. Harry laughed, delighted by this glimpse into his godfather's rebellious past. As they continued walking, Sirius shared more stories from his youth, pranks with Harry's father, holidays with the Potters after running away from home at 16, his training as an Auror alongside James. In turn, Harry described his growing friendship with Fleur, his magical training at the sanctuary, and his hopes for the future. The conversation flowed easily between them, the connection strengthening with each exchange. By the time they returned to the main citadel for dinner, Harry felt a certainty he had rarely experienced in his young life: Sirius Black was meant to be part of his future. The exact nature of their relationship would evolve over time, but the foundation was solid, built on mutual respect, shared loss, and genuine affection. During dinner with the Delacours and the elders, Harry watched Sirius charm the table with his wit and attentiveness. Despite years of imprisonment, the man's natural charisma remained intact, though now tempered with a wisdom and humility that his younger self had apparently lacked. Your godfather is quite personable, Fleur observed quietly as they moved from the dining room to the music hall for the evening's entertainment. The stories don't do him justice. What stories have you heard? Harry asked curiously. That he was the white sheep of the darkest family in Britain. That before his imprisonment, he was considered one of the most eligible bachelors in magical Europe. She smirked slightly. That his escapades with your father were legendary even in France. He's more than those stories, Harry said, watching as Sirius engaged Elder Calianira in an animated discussion about international magical law. He survived things that would have broken most people. As have you, Fleur pointed out. Perhaps that's why you connected so quickly. You both understand what it means to lose your freedom and find it again. Her insight struck Harry deeply. He hadn't considered that parallel, but it felt true. Both he and Sirius had endured different forms of imprisonment, Sirius in Azkaban's physical confines, Harry within the magical bindings that had constrained his very being. Both were now navigating newfound freedom with its challenges and opportunities. The evening concluded with traditional Veela music, hauntingly beautiful melodies played on instruments unique to their culture. Harry noticed Sirius listening with rapt attention, occasionally closing his eyes as if to better absorb the sound. "The music helps, doesn't it?" Harry asked quietly as they walked back toward their quarters afterward. "With the Azkaban memories?" Sirius looked startled, then thoughtful. "Yes, actually." "How did you know?" "I've noticed that certain kinds of music help me after binding removals," Harry explained. "It's like it gives my magic something to resonate with, helps it find its natural pattern again." "Perceptive," Sirius commented. "And accurate. The Dementors, they create a kind of dissonance in your magic. Music, especially this kind with its mathematical harmonies, helps restore order to that chaos." He studied Harry with renewed interest. "Your healers mentioned you have strong intuitive magical abilities." "I'm beginning to see what they meant." Harry shrugged, uncomfortable with praise he wasn't sure he deserved. "I'm still learning." "Aren't we all?" Sirius replied with a wry smile. Then, more seriously, "Harry, there's something I'd like to discuss with you before I leave tomorrow." They had reached the door to the guest suite Sirius had been assigned, adjacent to Harry's own rooms in the Citadel's eastern wing. "Is everything all right?" Harry asked, suddenly concerned. "Yes, absolutely," Sirius assured him. "It's actually a positive matter, but one that requires some thought." "May I?" He gestured to the sitting room within his suite. Harry followed him inside, curious. Sirius paced a few steps, seeming to gather his thoughts, before turning to face his godson. "As you know, I've been declared innocent and reinstated as Lord Black, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails." He hesitated, then continued, "Part of those responsibilities involves securing the future of House Black. Traditionally, that means naming an heir." "Okay," Harry said slowly, not quite following where this was leading. "Harry, I'd like to name you as my heir," Sirius said directly. "Not to replace your Potter inheritance, but in addition to it." Harry stared at him, stunned. "But, why me? Don't you want to have your own family someday?" "Perhaps," Sirius acknowledged. "But the future is uncertain, especially given my health. And regardless of whether I someday have children of my own, I want you to have this connection to me, legally, magically, and personally." His expression grew more earnest. "Your father was my brother in all but blood. He named me your godfather with the intention that I would care for you as my own if anything happened to him. This would fulfill that intention in the most formal way possible." "What would it mean, exactly?" Harry asked, trying to process this unexpected offer. "Legally, you would become my heir presumptive. You'd have access to Black family properties, assets, and political influence when you come of age." Sirius smiled wryly. "It's a significant position in British magical society, for whatever that's worth to you now." "And magically?" "There would be a ritual acknowledgement of our connection. It's not adoption in the strict sense, you would remain Harry James Potter, but you would also be recognized by magic as a member of the House of Black, with all the protections that entails." Sirius hesitated. "Including some additional shielding against those who might wish to control you." Harry's eyes narrowed with understanding. "You mean Dumbledore?" "Among others," Sirius confirmed. "The Black family magic is protective of its own. Sometimes aggressively so. While I've rejected much of my family's darker traditions, that particular trait might prove useful in your situation." Harry considered the offer carefully. "Would this affect my Veela heritage in any way?" "It shouldn't," Sirius replied. "Family magic acknowledgements are additive, not replacing. Your Veela blood comes through your mother's line and would remain intact. The Black family magic would simply recognize you as also belonging to our line." He smiled slightly. "In fact, there are distant Veela connections in the Black family tree as well, though much further back than your mother's line." "I'd need to discuss this with the elders," Harry said after a moment. "And with Apollon," since she's my diplomatic guardian. Of course, Sirius agreed readily. I wouldn't want you to decide something this significant without proper counsel. I just wanted to put the offer on the table during this visit. His expression softened. There's no rush, Harry. Think about it. Discuss it with your advisors. Whatever you decide, my door is always open to you. The simple sincerity of this statement moved Harry deeply. Thank you, he said quietly. Not just for the offer, but for giving me the choice. Something like pain flickered across Sirius's features. Choices are precious, Harry. Especially when you've had so few of them. He reached out cautiously and, when Harry didn't pull away, rested a hand on his shoulder. Whatever else happens, I want you to know that your choices matter to me. Your opinions, your feelings, your desires for your own future, all of it matters. The contrast with Dumbledore's manipulations could not have been more stark. Where the headmaster had bound Harry's very being to force him down a predetermined path, Sirius offered connection with the freedom to determine its shape. I'll think about it, Harry promised. Really think about it. That's all I ask, Sirius replied with a smile. Now, it's getting late, and I've been told you have a binding removal scheduled for tomorrow morning before my departure. You should rest. Harry nodded, suddenly aware of his fatigue. The emotional intensity of the day had drained him more than he'd realized. Good night, Sirius. I'm really glad you came. Good night, pup. So am I. As Harry made his way to his own rooms, he found himself contemplating Sirius's offer from multiple angles. The legal and political advantages were significant, particularly if he ever chose to return to British magical society. The magical protections could prove valuable against Dumbledore's continued attempts to regain control. And the personal aspect, the formal acknowledgement of his connection to his parents' closest friend, held an emotional appeal he couldn't deny. But it was a major decision, one that would shape his future in ways he couldn't fully anticipate. As he prepared for bed, Harry resolved to seek counsel from those who had proven worthy of his trust, the elders, Apollon, and perhaps even Fleur, whose practical perspective often helped clarify his thoughts. For now, though, he would simply cherish the day's events, the connection forged, the stories shared, the foundation laid for whatever their relationship might become. The binding removal the following morning targeted one of the more insidious restrictions Dumbledore had placed on Harry, a subtle compulsion to doubt his own judgment when it contradicted authority figures. As Master Healer Solane explained before beginning the procedure, this particular binding had likely contributed to Harry's reluctance to question the Dursleys' treatment despite its obvious unfairness. This binding works in concert with several others we've already removed, she elaborated as Harry settled onto the healing dais. It creates a cognitive dissonance when your natural instincts contradict what you're told by those positioned as authorities. Rather than trusting your perception, the binding encourages self-doubt and eventual submission. Why would Dumbledore want that? Harry asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Control, Sirius growled from his position at the edge of the healing chamber, where he'd been permitted to observe. It's easier to manipulate someone who doesn't trust their own judgment. Solane nodded in agreement. Indeed. And given what we've learned about the prophecy and Dumbledore's apparent plans for you, creating a compliant mindset would have been advantageous to his goals. Harry took a deep breath, centering himself as he'd been taught. Let's remove it then. The process followed the now familiar pattern: preparatory potions to stabilize his magic, crystalline focuses placed at strategic points on his body, and the melodic chanting of the Veela healers creating the energy pattern needed to safely dissolve the binding. Sirius watched with barely contained fury as the binding manifested visually, a web of sickly yellow light around Harry's head that constricted like a tightening net before finally shattering under the healers' concerted efforts. When it broke, Harry gasped as clarity flooded his mind. Memories cascaded through his consciousness, dozens of moments when he'd known something was wrong but had doubted himself instead of acting on that knowledge. Times at the Dursleys when he'd questioned whether their treatment was truly unfair. School incidents where he'd accepted blame that wasn't his. Even small daily decisions where he deferred to others despite his own contrary instincts. How do you feel? Solane asked after giving him a moment to process the change. Like I've been seeing through foggy glasses all my life and someone just cleaned them, Harry replied, his voice stronger than usual after a binding removal. I can trust myself now. You always could, Sirius said quietly. Dumbledore just made it difficult for you to realize that. The removal left Harry energized rather than depleted, unusual, but as Solane explained, this particular binding had been constantly draining his magic to maintain itself. With it gone, that energy now flowed freely within him. This is why we scheduled this removal for today, Solane told Sirius as Harry completed his post-procedure assessment. We wanted Harry to experience this particular freedom with you present. To see him embrace his own judgment. Thank you, Sirius replied, genuine gratitude in his voice. It's. He paused, seemingly overwhelmed. It's remarkable to witness. After the healing session concluded, Harry and Sirius enjoyed a private breakfast on a balcony overlooking the sanctuary. The morning light bathed the valley in golden hues, highlighting the vivid colors of the gardens and the crystalline blue of the lake. I've made a decision, Harry announced as they finished their meal. About your offer to make me your heir. Sirius set down his coffee cup, giving Harry his full attention. Already? I thought you'd take more time to consider. I would have, before this morning, Harry explained, a small smile playing at his lips. But with that binding gone, I can see much more clearly now. I know what I want. And what is that? Sirius asked, carefully neutral. I want to accept, Harry said firmly. Not for the political advantages or even the magical protections, though those are significant. I want to accept because it feels right. Because it honors the connection my parents wanted us to have. Because it creates a family bond that Dumbledore can't manipulate or sever. The joy that spread across Sirius's face was radiant. You're certain? You don't need more time. I'm certain, Harry confirmed. I've already spoken with Elder Thalassa. She says the Black family magic won't interfere with my Veela heritage, and might actually help stabilize my magical core as the remaining bindings are removed. She's right, Sirius agreed. The Black family magic is adaptable. More so than many pure-blood lineages. It's one of the few things about my heritage I've always appreciated. So how do we do this? Harry asked. The full ritual would typically be performed at the ancestral seat of House Black, Sirius explained. But given the circumstances, we can perform a preliminary acknowledgement here that will establish the magical connection. The formal ceremony can wait until you're ready to visit Britain. And when might that be? Harry asked, suddenly realizing he'd been avoiding thoughts of returning to the country of his birth. Sirius studied him thoughtfully. That depends on many factors. Your healing progress, your comfort level, the political situation. He paused before adding, and how successful we are at neutralizing Dumbledore's influence. Is that even possible? Harry asked skeptically. He seems to control everything in British magical society. Not everything, Sirius corrected. And his position has weakened considerably since your departure and my exoneration. The revelations about your bindings, combined with the suppression of my trial, have raised serious questions about his judgment. But he's still Chief Warlock and Headmaster, Harry pointed out. For now, Sirius agreed. But the next Wisengamot session includes a confidence vote. And the Board of Governors is reviewing his tenure at Hogwarts. His expression turned grimly satisfied. I may have been instrumental in initiating both reviews. Harry grinned. Using the Black political influence already? Among other resources, Sirius admitted. The evidence from the goblins about your bindings provided the opening. Your mother's sealed journals, which were recovered from the Potter Vault, supplied additional damning evidence of Dumbledore's manipulations even before your parents' deaths. My mother kept journals? Harry asked, momentarily distracted from the political discussion. Can I read them? Of course, Sirius assured him. I've already arranged for copies to be sent here. The originals remain secure in the high-security Potter vault. Harry nodded gratefully, then returned to their previous topic. So if Dumbledore loses his positions of authority, then returning to Britain becomes a more viable option, Sirius finished. Though still entirely your choice, on your timeline. Harry appreciated the careful way Sirius presented options without pressure. I think I'd like to complete at least a full year of healing before considering it, he decided. And to start my magical education through Beauxbatons as planned. A sensible approach, Sirius approved. It gives time for the political situation to stabilize and for your own magic to strengthen further. And for us to get to know each other better, Harry added. Sirius's smile was warm. That too. They spent the remaining hours before Sirius's scheduled departure discussing the preliminary heir acknowledgement ritual, which Elder Thalassa had agreed could take place in the sanctuary's ceremonial chamber that afternoon. The ritual itself was relatively simple, an exchange of magical intent, sealed with freely given blood and witnessed by representatives of both the Veela Nation and Gringotts Bank, the latter specially port-keyed in for the occasion. This will establish the initial connection between you and the Black family magic, Sirius explained as they prepared. You may feel a distinct presence, sentient but not quite conscious in the human sense, evaluating you. What if it doesn't accept me? Harry asked, a flicker of old insecurities surfacing despite the removal of the doubt-inducing binding. Sirius's expression was confident. It will. You're my chosen heir, and despite my rebellious reputation, the family magic has always recognized me as a true Black. Through me, it will accept you. The ritual proceeded smoothly, the ancient words of acknowledgement spoken by Sirius resonating in the chamber as he and Harry clasped forearms, a single drop of blood from each mingling on the ceremonial dagger between them. Harry felt the moment the Black family magic responded, a sudden rush of awareness, ancient and powerful, sweeping through him like a winter wind before settling into a quiet, watchful presence at the edges of his consciousness. It accepted you, Sirius said, satisfaction evident in his voice. I can feel the connection forming. Harry nodded, unable to fully articulate the strange sensation of being recognized by a magic older than himself. It felt different from his Veela heritage, cooler, more analytical, but equally accepting of who he was. Heir Potter Black, the Goblin witness intoned formally, may your vaults overflow and your enemies tremble before you. The preliminary acknowledgement is recorded and will be registered with Gringotts globally. Thank you, Master Bloodclaw, Harry replied, using the formal address Fleur had taught him for Goblin interactions. May your gold multiply and your honor never tarnish. The Goblin's eyes widened slightly in surprise before his lips curved in what might have been a smile. You have been well taught, young heir. After the witnesses departed, Sirius embraced Harry once more. This changes nothing about who you are, he assured him quietly. But it does add another layer of protection around you. The Black family magic is particularly vindictive toward those who harm its own. Is that why you suggested it? Harry asked. As protection against Dumbledore? Partly, Sirius admitted. But mostly because it's what James and Lily would have wanted. They named me your godfather with the understanding that I would make you my heir if anything happened to them. His eyes grew distant with memory. We discussed it the night they went into hiding. It was one of the last conversations we ever had. The poignancy of this revelation struck Harry deeply. This connection to Sirius wasn't just about his present and future, it was also a fulfillment of his parents' wishes, a thread connecting him to their final acts of love and protection. When the time came for Sirius to depart, their farewell was bittersweet but not final. Plans were already in place for regular communication, and Sirius had promised to return for a longer visit once the remaining political matters in Britain were settled. This isn't goodbye, Sirius assured him as they stood at the Portkey departure point. It's just until next time. I know, Harry said, surprised to find he truly believed it. Thank you for coming. For everything. "Thank you for giving me a second chance," Sirius replied, his voice rough with emotion. "For letting me be part of your life." They embraced one final time before Sirius activated the port key, disappearing in a swirl of golden light. Harry stood staring at the empty space for a long moment afterward, processing the events of the past 2 days. "He is a good man," Fleur observed, approaching from where she had been waiting discreetly nearby. "Different from what I expected." "How so?" Harry asked as they began walking back toward the citadel. "Less broken," she replied thoughtfully. "When one hears 9 years in Azkaban, one imagines someone shattered beyond repair. But he has an extraordinary resilience. Like someone else I know," she added with a meaningful look at Harry. Harry smiled at the comparison. "I think that's why we connected so quickly. We understand something about each other without having to explain it." "The bond of survivors," Fleur nodded. "It's powerful." She glanced at him curiously. "How does it feel?" "The Black family magic." "Strange but not unwelcome," Harry replied, trying to find words for the new sensation. "Like having a silent guardian that watches through my eyes sometimes. It feels protective, but in a different way than the Veela fire. Colder, more calculating. A useful balance, perhaps," Fleur suggested. "The fire of your Veela heritage and the ice of the Black legacy." "Maybe," Harry agreed. "Though I have a lot to learn about controlling both." "Good thing you have excellent teachers," she teased, flipping her silvery hair with mock arrogance. Harry laughed, grateful for her ability to lighten even the most serious moments. As they continued toward their afternoon lessons, he felt a newfound confidence in his steps, partly from the removed binding, partly from the connection forged with Sirius, and partly from the growing certainty that he was, at last, walking his own path. Albus Dumbledore stood before the Wizengamot, outwardly composed despite the growing awareness that his carefully constructed world was unraveling thread by thread. The confidence vote had been called suddenly, with insufficient time for his usual political maneuvering. "The evidence before us suggests a pattern of decisions that, while perhaps well-intended, demonstrates concerning lapses in judgment," Augusta Longbottom declared, her formidable presence commanding attention from the assembled members. "The illegal placement of binding spells on a minor heir of an ancient house. The suppression of Sirius Black's trial. The sealing of the Potter wills against the explicit instructions of the Gringotts executors." Murmurs rippled through the chamber as she continued listing the charges against him, each one carefully documented, each one damaging to the carefully cultivated image of the wise, benevolent leader of the light. "I have only ever acted for the greater good," Dumbledore responded when finally permitted to speak in his defense. "The unique circumstances surrounding Harry Potter required extraordinary measures to ensure his safety and the stability of our society." "Extraordinary measures?" Amelia Bones challenged, her monocle flashing in the torchlight. "Is that how you characterize 88 illegal magical bindings placed on a child without guardian consent? Bindings that suppressed not only his magic but his intelligence, emotional development, and physical growth? The bindings were necessary to contain the magical instability caused by Voldemort's attack," Dumbledore insisted. "Harry's unusual survival created unprecedented magical conditions that required careful management." "Then why were these necessary bindings not documented with the Department of Mysteries, as required by the Magical Protections Act of 1749? Bones countered. "Why were they not monitored by certified healers from St. Mungo's? Why were they placed in increasing numbers throughout the child's development, long after any potential instability from the attack should have stabilized?" Dumbledore felt the chamber's mood shifting against him with each unanswerable question. The evidence, meticulously compiled by the combined efforts of the DMLE, Gringotts, and, most damaging of all, Lily Potter's own sealed journals, painted a picture not of wise protection but of systematic control. "The prophecy," he began, "is not yours to interpret unilaterally," Augusta interrupted sharply. "Even if we accept that a genuine prophecy exists concerning Harry Potter and he who must not be named, it does not grant you authority to violate magical law or parental wishes. The vote, when it came, was decisive. Dumbledore was removed as chief warlock by a margin that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. He retained his position as headmaster of Hogwarts, but only by the slimmest of margins and with newly imposed oversight from the Board of Governors. As he departed the chamber, his customary dignity intact despite the humiliation, Dumbledore considered his diminished position. The carefully laid plans of decades had been disrupted by the Goblin's unexpected intervention and the boys' asylum with the Veela. Yet the prophecy remained, its inexorable mechanics still in motion. Voldemort would return, of this, Dumbledore had no doubt. When he did, Harry Potter would still be the key to his final defeat. The path had changed, but the destination remained fixed by the immutable laws of prophecy and fate. He would need to adapt his approach. Direct control was no longer possible, but influence might still be achieved through more subtle means. The boy would eventually return to Britain. When he did, Dumbledore would be ready with a new strategy, one that accounted for Harry's newfound independence and protections. The greater good still required Harry Potter's ultimate sacrifice. The only question was how to guide him to that inevitable conclusion when he now stood beyond Dumbledore's immediate reach. The international task force assembled by the Unspeakables made its first significant breakthrough in late October. In a secure chamber deep beneath the French Ministry of Magic, representatives from Britain, France, Germany, and the United States gathered to review their findings. "We've confirmed the existence of multiple Horcruxes," reported Unspeakable Croaker, his features obscured by the standard enchantments protecting the identity of those in his position. The fragment extracted from Potter's scar matched the magical signature of an object recently discovered in the abandoned Gaunt Shack in Little Hangleton. "What was the object?" asked the French representative. "A ring. Ancient, with a distinctive black stone that our preliminary analysis suggests may be the legendary resurrection stone of the Deathly Hallows." Croaker's tone conveyed the significance of this possibility. "The Horcrux has been contained and is scheduled for destruction using controlled fiendfire next week." "That makes 2 confirmed," noted the German Unspeakable. "The scar fragment and the ring. And we have strong evidence suggesting at least 4 others," added the American. "Our analysis of Voldemort's known activities and the magical residue from the Potter household indicates a deliberate pattern of Horcrux creation, likely targeting symbolically significant objects." "Have we determined whether Dumbledore was aware of these artifacts?" asked the French representative. Croaker hesitated. "The evidence is circumstantial but compelling. Dumbledore's private journals, which we obtained through unconventional means, contain research notes on Horcruxes dating back to the early 1940s, with specific references to Tom Riddle's interest in the subject." "So he knew," the German concluded grimly. "He knew what resided in Potter's scar, yet he didn't remove it. Instead, he bound the boy's magic and placed him with magic-hating muggles." "The implications are disturbing," agreed the American. "Was he attempting to contain the fragment? Or were his plans more sinister? Either way, we move forward without his direct involvement," Croaker decided. "The operation remains classified at the highest level. Not even the new chief warlock is to be informed of our findings until all Horcruxes are located and neutralized." "And Potter?" asked the French representative. "Should he be informed of what was removed from him?" "Not yet," Croaker advised. "The boy is still healing from extensive magical trauma. Adding this knowledge prematurely could complicate his recovery. The Veela healers have confirmed no dark residue remains in his scar. For now, that must be sufficient." The meeting continued with assignments of resources and coordination of international search efforts. By its conclusion, a comprehensive plan had been established to locate and destroy the remaining Horcruxes without alerting either the general magical public or Voldemort's remaining supporters of their activities. What none of them realized was that in a manor house in Albania, a weakened but determined spirit had just possessed another temporary host, continuing its patient wait for the opportunity to regain corporeal form. Voldemort might have been temporarily defeated, but he was far from destroyed. The winter solstice at the Veela sanctuary was marked by a celebration unlike anything Harry had ever experienced. As darkness fell on the shortest day of the year, the entire community gathered at the ceremonial circle at the center of the valley. Each participant carried an unlit torch, and the atmosphere hummed with anticipation. The solstice represents the darkest point before the return of light, Fleur explained as they took their places in the circle. For Veela, fire carriers by nature, it holds special significance. We renew our inner flame and share it with others to sustain all through the remaining winter. Harry nodded, feeling oddly nervous. This would be his first major Veela ritual as an active participant rather than an observer. In the nearly 5 months since his arrival at the sanctuary, he had witnessed several cultural celebrations, but always from the periphery as he focused on his healing. Now, with 59 of his 88 bindings removed and his Veela heritage increasingly awakened, the elders had invited him to take part in the central ritual. It was both an honor and a responsibility that he took seriously. Remember what Elder Lysithea taught you, Fleur reminded him, noting his tension. The fire comes from within. Don't try to force it, allow it to express itself naturally. Harry took a deep breath, centering himself as he practiced. His control over his Veela fire had improved dramatically over the past months, evolving from unconscious flares during emotional moments to deliberate manifestation when needed. Still, participating in a community ritual was different from practice sessions. Elder Thalassa stepped into the center of the circle, her silver hair gleaming in the last light of dusk. As darkness finally claimed the sky, she raised her hands and began the ritual invocation, a haunting melody in the ancient Veela language that resonated through the valley. One by one, the gathered Veela joined the song, their voices blending in perfect harmony. Harry listened carefully for his cue, then added his voice to the rising chorus. Though still learning the language, he had practiced this particular chant for weeks under Fleur's patient guidance. As the music reached its crescendo, Elder Thalassa extended her arms toward the star-filled sky. From her palms erupted twin columns of golden fire that shot upward, illuminating the gathering in warm light. The sight never failed to awe Harry, the perfect control, the beautiful symmetry of the flames that danced without consuming. Now came the moment Harry had been preparing for. As the ritual continued, each participant would ignite their torch with their inner fire, creating a circle of light to symbolize community and renewal. Fleur went first among their section, her face serene with concentration as she summoned her fire. Golden flames appeared in her cupped palms, dancing for a moment before she directed them to her torch with a graceful gesture. The torch ignited instantly, burning with a steady golden glow that complemented her silvery hair and blue eyes. She turned to Harry with an encouraging nod. "Your turn." Harry closed his eyes briefly, finding the warm core of energy that he now recognized as his Veela heritage. In the months since its unbinding, this energy had become familiar, a constant presence that responded to his emotions and intent. He drew it forward carefully, visualizing it moving from his center to his hands. When he opened his eyes, golden flames danced across his palms, their warmth comforting rather than burning. With a gesture similar to Fleur's but less practiced, he directed the fire to his torch. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened, then the torch blazed to life, its flame steady and bright. A ripple of approving murmurs went through the gathering. For a young, male, partial Veela to manifest such clear control was unusual, Fleur had told him. Another sign of the strength of his magical core now that the bindings were being removed. The ritual continued around the circle until every torch blazed with golden light. Then, as one, the gathered Veela raised their flames toward the center where Elder Thalassa stood. The individual fires seemed to connect, forming a dome of shimmering gold light above the circle that pulsed with the combined magic of the community. From within this dome, Elder Thalassa began the blessing, calling for renewal, strength, and unity in the coming turn of the seasons. As she spoke, Harry felt the magic washing through him, refreshing his own inner fire and connecting him to every person in the circle in a way that transcended ordinary communication. For the first time since arriving at the sanctuary, he felt truly part of the community, not just as a refugee or patient, but as a kinsman recognized and welcomed for who he was. The sensation was powerful enough to bring unexpected tears to his eyes. When the ritual concluded an hour later, the participants dispersed with their still-burning torches, carrying the sacred fire back to their dwellings where it would be kept burning until dawn. Harry and Fleur walked together through the snow-dusted gardens, their torches illuminating the path. "You did well," Fleur said, her usual critique softened by evident pride. "Your control is improving." "Thanks to your teaching," Harry replied, genuinely grateful for her patience over the past months. Despite her own studies at Beauxbatons, she had made time during holidays and weekends to help him understand and develop his Veela abilities. "The fire comes from you, not from my instruction," she corrected. "I merely showed you how to access what was already there." They reached the citadel, where a celebration feast awaited the community. Before entering, Harry paused, looking back at the valley spread below them, a constellation of moving lights as people returned from the ritual with their torches. "It's beautiful," he observed. "All those individual flames, but connected somehow." Fleur nodded. "That's the essence of Veela community. Individually strong, collectively stronger." She studied him in the torchlight. "You felt it during the ritual, didn't you? The connection." "Yes," Harry admitted. "It was. I've never experienced anything like it." "It's one of the gifts of our heritage," Fleur explained. "The ability to connect through fire magic, to strengthen each other across distances." She smiled slightly. "It's why Veela are rarely truly alone, even when physically separated from family." As they entered the citadel for the feast, Harry reflected on how different his life had become in just half a year. From isolation and constraint to connection and expanding freedom. From ignorance of his heritage to growing understanding and acceptance. From having his path dictated by others to finding his own way forward. The solstice feast celebrated not just the turning of the year, but the community's achievements and hopes. As tradition dictated, each person shared one accomplishment from the passing year and one intention for the year ahead. When Harry's turn came, he rose from his seat, still holding his ritual torch. "My achievement was finding my true heritage and beginning to heal from what was done to me," he said, his voice steady despite the personal nature of his statement. "My intention for the coming year is to continue that healing while learning to use my abilities to protect others as my parents would have wished." Approving nods greeted his words, along with the traditional response, "May your fire light the way." Later, as the celebration continued with music and dancing, Harry stepped onto one of the citadel's balconies for a moment of quiet reflection. The winter air was crisp but not bitter, the sanctuary's magic maintaining a climate milder than the surrounding mountains would suggest. "Not enjoying the festivities?" Apollon asked, joining him at the balustrade. "Just taking a moment," Harry replied. "It's been an overwhelming day, but in a good way." Apollon nodded understandingly. The first time participating in the solstice ritual is always powerful, especially for those with newly awakened abilities. "I felt like I belonged," Harry admitted quietly. "Not because of who my parents were or what happened when I was a baby, but just because of who I am now." "You do belong," Apollon assured him. "Not just because of your Veela heritage, but because of the person you're becoming." She smiled warmly. "The elders are quite impressed with your progress, you know. Both in healing and in developing your abilities." "It's all thanks to the sanctuary," Harry said, gesturing to the valley below. "The sanctuary provided the environment," Apollon corrected gently, "but the strength came from within you." "Never doubt that, Harry." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before she continued. "I received news today that I wanted to share with you. The Beauxbatons board has reviewed your tutorial progress and approved your transition to full attendance after the spring holidays, should the healers agree that you're ready." Harry turned to her in surprise. "Really? I thought it would take at least a full year." "Your progress has exceeded all expectations," Apollon explained. "Academically, you've completed the first-year requirements in just 4 months. Magically, your control improves daily as more bindings are removed. And the healers believe that the remaining bindings can be safely managed with periodic returns to the sanctuary for continued removal procedures. What about security concerns? Dumbledore has been significantly neutralized as a threat, Apollon assured him. His removal as chief warlock, combined with the new restrictions on his authority at Hogwarts, has curtailed much of his influence. Additionally, Sirius has filed for formal magical guardianship of you under the Black Family Protocols, which would supersede any claims Dumbledore might attempt to resurrect. Harry processed this information, feeling both excited and apprehensive at the prospect of joining a formal school environment. His correspondence studies had gone well, but the idea of attending classes with other students, of navigating social interactions without the sanctuary's protective environment, was daunting. You don't have to decide immediately, Apollon added, noting his conflicted expression. Discuss it with Sirius during his Yule visit next week. Consult the healers. This is your decision, Harry. The emphasis on his agency, his right to choose his own path, still felt novel after years of having his options constrained. I'll think about it, he promised. And talk it through with Sirius and the healers. That's all anyone can ask, Apollon said warmly. Now, shall we return to the celebration? I believe Gabrielle is preparing to perform the traditional solstice dance with her age group, and she would be devastated if you missed it. Harry smiled at the mention of the young girl who had appointed herself his honorary little sister over the past months. We can't have that. Lead the way. As they rejoined the festivities, Harry carried with him not just the ritual torch but a growing sense of possibility. The coming year might bring new challenges, but he would face them with greater strength, understanding, and support than he had ever known before. The spring equinox dawned clear and mild over the Veela sanctuary, the balance of day and night mirrored in the peaceful atmosphere that permeated the valley. For Harry Potter, newly turned 11 according to the magical calendar that recognized conception rather than birth as the beginning of life, the day held special significance. Today marked the removal of the final binding, the 88th constraint placed by Dumbledore to control and shape him according to the headmaster's designs. After nearly 9 months of careful, sequential removals, Harry would finally be completely free of external magical influence for the first time since he was 15 months old. How do you feel? Sirius asked as they walked together toward the healing temple for the procedure. Harry considered the question seriously. Nervous but ready, he finally replied. It's strange to think that after today, I'll be fully myself, whoever that turns out to be. You've been becoming yourself all along, Sirius pointed out. Each binding removal has revealed another piece of the real Harry Potter. This was true. The changes over the past months had been remarkable, transforming him from the small, hesitant boy who had arrived at the sanctuary into a confident young wizard coming into his considerable power. Physically, he now stood tall for his age, his body having made up for years of suppressed growth with remarkable speed once the bindings were removed. His features had refined, showing more influence from both his parents, James's strong jawline beginning to emerge, Lily's delicate cheekbones becoming more pronounced. His eyes, always vibrantly green, now occasionally shifted to a golden green when his emotions ran high, reflecting his Veela heritage. Magically, the difference was even more dramatic. Harry's core strength had expanded with each binding removal, revealing power levels that even the elders found impressive. His natural affinities for protective magic and elemental manipulation, particularly fire, given his Veela blood, had blossomed under careful tutelage. Most importantly, his control had developed alongside his power, allowing him to direct his considerable abilities with increasing precision. Master Paralis says my casting style is unusual, Harry commented as they neared the temple. A blend of traditional wizard technique and Veela intuitive magic. That makes sense, Sirius replied thoughtfully. You're learning formal wizarding magic through the Beauxbatons curriculum while simultaneously developing your Veela abilities. The integration of both approaches could become a significant advantage. Harry nodded, having reached the same conclusion himself. Fleur says it makes me unpredictable in dueling practice. She can't anticipate whether I'll use a standard spell or a more intuitive approach. Speaking of Fleur, Sirius segued casually, she seems quite invested in your progress for someone who initially appeared so aloof. Harry felt a flush creeping up his neck. We're friends. Good friends. She understands what it's like to balance different aspects of magical heritage. Just friends? Sirius teased gently. She's 14, Sirius, Harry reminded him, rolling his eyes. Besides, she's heading into her 4th year at Beauxbatons with all the exams and social complications that entails. And I'll be just starting as a first year, catching up on all the social dynamics I've missed while healing here. A mature perspective, Sirius conceded, though his eyes still twinkled with amusement. Though I note you didn't deny finding her attractive. I'd have to be blind not to notice she's beautiful, Harry admitted with the frankness that had developed as the emotional suppression bindings were removed. But that's just part of who she is, not the most important part. Sirius's expression turned more serious. That's a rare perspective when it comes to Veela, from what I understand. Most wizards have difficulty seeing past the allure to the person beneath. Maybe it's because I have Veela blood myself, Harry suggested. Or maybe it's because I've gotten to know her as a person first, a Veela second. Either way, it speaks well of you, Sirius said warmly. Then, changing the subject, have you made your decision about Beauxbatons? The term begins in 3 weeks. Yes, Harry confirmed. Assuming today's procedure goes well and the healers give final approval, I'll attend as planned. He glanced at his godfather. Are you sure about the arrangements? Moving to France temporarily is a significant commitment. After months of careful negotiation and planning, Sirius had arranged to lease a home near Beauxbatons where Harry could stay during school breaks rather than remaining in the dormitories like most students. This arrangement provided both security and privacy while allowing Harry to experience a more normal school environment than the correspondence program had offered. Absolutely certain, Sirius assured him. Britain holds too many painful memories for both of us right now. A fresh start in France makes sense practically and emotionally. He grinned. Besides, I've always been partial to French wine and coastal living. The property I've leased has a lovely view of the Mediterranean. Their conversation paused as they reached the healing temple where Master Healer Solane awaited them with her team. The now familiar routine of preparation began, potions for stability, crystalline focuses positioned strategically, the healing dais prepared with fresh linens. The final binding is complex, Solane explained as Harry settled onto the dais. It appears to be the first one placed, likely immediately after your parents' deaths. It's woven deeply into your magical core and connected to the curse scar itself. What exactly does it do? Sirius asked, his expression concerned. It restricts Harry's deepest connection to his innate magic, Solane replied. While the other bindings controlled specific aspects of his abilities, personality, or development, this one limits his fundamental magical nature, his magical resonance, if you will. Like putting a damper on an instrument? Harry suggested, having learned much about magical theory during his healing. An apt analogy, Solane agreed with an approving nod. It allows the instrument to play, but mutes its full tone and range. Removing it will allow your magic to express itself completely for the first time since infancy. Are there risks? Sirius asked, his protective instincts evident. Always, Solane acknowledged honestly. But we've prepared methodically for this moment. The sequential removal of the other bindings has gradually strengthened Harry's core to handle the final release. The equinox timing is also deliberate, the natural magical balance of the day will help stabilize the process. I'm ready, Harry said firmly, meeting Sirius's worried gaze with calm determination. I need to be free of his influence completely. Sirius nodded, understanding the importance of this final step. I'll be right here. The procedure began as it had 87 times before, with the melodic chanting of the Veela healers creating the magical matrix needed to safely dissolve the binding. This time, however, the binding revealed itself differently when called forth for removal. Instead of the colored light patterns of previous bindings, this one manifested as a dark, pulsing web centered on Harry's lightning scar. Tendrils of shadow spread from that point throughout his magical core, their pattern more organic than constructed, as if the binding had grown like a living thing over the years. "This is unusual," Solane murmured, her concentration never wavering despite her concern. "The binding appears to have adapted and evolved since its placement. Is that normal?" Sirius asked tensely. "No," she replied. "Bindings are typically static magical constructs. This one shows signs of semisentience." Harry, deep in the trance-like state required for the procedure, nevertheless heard these exchanges. Something about the binding's appearance triggered a distant memory, a sensation he had experienced during the very first binding removal at Gringotts, when something dark and oily had been pulled from his scar. "There was something else in there before," he murmured, his voice distant. "Something that was removed that first night." The healers exchanged significant glances but continued their work without interruption. The chanting intensified, the magical pressure in the chamber building as they carefully isolated the binding from Harry's core. When the dissolution finally began, Harry experienced a sensation unlike any previous binding removal, a feeling of something uncoiling from around his very essence, releasing a pressure he had never realized existed. As the binding dissolved completely, a surge of pure magical energy rushed through him, temporarily overwhelming his senses. Colors became more vivid, sounds more distinct, magical auras around him suddenly visible in their full complexity. Most significantly, his connection to his own magic deepened profoundly, no longer something he accessed with effort but an integral part of his being that responded to his slightest intention. "Breathe, Harry," Solane's voice guided him through the overwhelming sensations. "Allow your magic to find its natural balance. Don't fight the integration." For several minutes, Harry focused solely on breathing through the intense experience as his magic adjusted to its newfound freedom. Gradually, the overwhelming input subsided to manageable levels, leaving him with expanded awareness rather than sensory overload. When he finally opened his eyes, the world looked simultaneously familiar and entirely new. The magical auras of those around him were clear without conscious effort, Sirius's midnight blue with silver highlights, Solane's golden-green healing signature, the varied hues of the other Veela healers. "How do you feel?" Solane asked, monitoring his vital signs with practiced precision. "Complete," Harry replied simply. The word felt inadequate but was fundamentally true. "Like I've been looking at everything through a clouded window all my life, and someone just cleaned the glass." Sirius stepped closer, his expression a mixture of awe and fierce pride. "Your eyes," he said softly. "They're changing." A mirror was brought, and Harry observed with fascination as his irises shifted color, cycling through their natural emerald green to a brilliant gold green and back again as his magic settled into its unbound state. "The Veela heritage expressing itself more fully," Solane explained. "With the binding removed, your dual nature can now integrate properly." The post-procedure assessment took longer than usual, with each healer carefully evaluating different aspects of Harry's newly liberated magical core. By the time they finished, the equinox sun had passed its zenith and begun its descent toward evening. "The integration appears stable," Solane finally announced. "Though you may experience fluctuations in magical control for the next few days as your core fully adjusts." She turned to Sirius. "He should rest today and limit magical exertion for at least 48 hours. After that, gradual reintroduction of magical practice is recommended, beginning with the techniques he's most comfortable with." Sirius nodded, committing the instructions to memory. "And his readiness for Beau's batons?" "From a healing perspective, there are no remaining contraindications," Solane confirmed. "The final evaluation will take place next week as scheduled, but barring unforeseen complications, I anticipate full clearance for standard magical education." As they left the healing temple, Harry found himself experiencing the sanctuary with new awareness. The magical currents that sustained the valley's perfect climate were now visible to him as streams of energy flowing through the landscape. The natural magic of the plants and waters registered as subtle variations in his perception. Most strikingly, the connections between members of the Veela community appeared as delicate threads of golden light linking individuals as they went about their daily activities. "It's incredible," he murmured. "I can see magic everywhere." "Your magical sight has fully awakened," Sirius observed. James had something similar, though less pronounced. He could perceive magical signatures when he concentrated. He studied Harry with undisguised wonder. "You're doing it effortlessly." "It's almost too much information," Harry admitted as they reached his rooms in the Citadel. "Like trying to listen to 100 conversations at once." "You'll learn to filter it," Sirius assured him. "To focus on what's relevant and tune out the rest. For now, though, rest as the healers recommended. Your mind and magic need time to adjust." Harry nodded, suddenly aware of his exhaustion. The procedure had drained him more thoroughly than he'd initially realized. "Will you stay? At least until I fall asleep?" Something in Sirius's expression softened at the request. "Of course, pup. As long as you need." As Harry drifted toward sleep, his godfather sitting vigilantly nearby, he felt a profound sense of completion. For the first time in his remembered life, he existed fully as himself, not as Dumbledore's carefully constrained weapon, not as the Dursleys' unwanted burden, but simply as Harry Potter in all his complexity. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as he prepared for his transition to Beauxbatons and a more public life beyond the sanctuary's protection. But for this moment, in the peaceful aftermath of his final liberation, he allowed himself to simply be. Complete. Unbound. Free. The halls of Beauxbatons Academy of Magic echoed with the excited voices of students returning from summer holidays and newcomers arriving for their first year. Among them, Harry Potter Black, as he was now officially registered, navigated the elegant corridors with cautious confidence, his trunk floating obediently behind him with a simple levitation charm. "Remember, the first-year dormitories are in the eastern wing," Fleur reminded him as she walked alongside him, her prefect badge gleaming on her blue uniform robes. "Your name will be on the door, and your class schedule should be waiting on your desk." "I remember the orientation tour," Harry assured her with a small smile. "And I do have the map you drew." Fleur huffed slightly. "Forgive me for being thorough. It's not every day I escort a friend for his first day at my school." Despite her pretense of annoyance, Harry could see the genuine concern beneath. During the past months, Fleur had become not just a friend but a steadfast advocate, helping him prepare for integration into Beauxbatons' social and academic environment. "I appreciate it," he said sincerely. "Really. I'm just nervous and hiding it badly." Her expression softened. "You have nothing to be nervous about. You're academically prepared, magically capable, and—" She hesitated, then continued with uncharacteristic gentleness, "You are not alone here." The simple assurance meant more than she could know. After a lifetime of isolation, first imposed by the Dursleys' neglect, then by Dumbledore's manipulations, the knowledge that he had genuine connections was still a novelty Harry was learning to embrace. They reached the junction where their paths would separate, Fleur to the fourth-year dormitories in the western wing, Harry to the first-year accommodations eastward. "The welcome feast begins at 7, she reminded him. "Until then, settle in, meet your roommates, and try not to set anything on fire." The last was delivered with a teasing smile, referencing an incident during his magical control training when his Veela fire had briefly escaped his management. "One time," Harry protested good-naturedly. "It was one time." With a final encouraging nod, Fleur departed, her silvery hair catching the light from the enchanted windows that lined the corridor. Harry watched her go, drawing a steadying breath before continuing to his assigned dormitory. The eastern wing of Beauxbatons was designed specifically for younger students, with wider corridors, more natural light, and subtle guidance enchantments to help newcomers find their way. Unlike Hogwarts with its house-based segregation, Beauxbatons organized dormitories by year group, with students from all backgrounds mingling together. Harry found his assigned room easily enough, his name engraved on a silver plaque alongside three others, Jean-Paul Moreau, Miguel Santoro, and Stefan Kovac, representing the school's international character with students from France, Spain, and Serbia. Inside, he found a spacious chamber divided into 4 personal areas, each with a bed, desk, wardrobe, and small sitting area. The decor was elegant but not ostentatious, pale blue walls, polished wood furniture, and large windows overlooking the school's famous gardens. 2 of his roommates had already arrived and were in the process of unpacking. They looked up as Harry entered, curiosity evident in their expressions. "Hello," Harry greeted them in French, grateful for the intensive language training he'd received at the sanctuary. "I'm Harry Potter Black." Recognition flickered in their eyes. His story had made international news, though the full details of the bindings and his Veela heritage had been kept private. To the public, he was known primarily as the boy who lived who had rejected Hogwarts for beaux batons after irregularities in his guardianship were discovered. Jean-Paul Moreau, the taller boy, introduced himself, stepping forward to shake Harry's hand. "And this is Miguel Santoro." "Welcome to beaux batons," Miguel added with a friendly smile. "Your French is very good for an Englishman." "Thank you," Harry replied, returning the smile. "I've had excellent teachers." The initial introductions progressed to casual conversation as the boys helped each other unpack and organize their belongings. Harry was relieved to find both roommates friendly and unpretentious, treating him with normal curiosity rather than excessive deference or suspicion. Their 4th roommate, Stefan, arrived shortly before the welcome feast, a quiet, scholarly boy who seemed more interested in the books Harry had brought than in his celebrity status. By the time they departed for the dining hall together, the first tentative bonds of friendship had begun to form. The Beauxbatons dining hall was a marvel of magical architecture, a vast space with a ceiling that reflected the real sky above but enhanced its beauty, making even a cloudy evening appear as a dramatic canvas of color and light. Long tables arranged in a horseshoe pattern filled the hall, with students seated by year group but not further segregated. As the first years found their designated table, Harry couldn't help comparing the scene to what he knew of Hogwarts from books and Sirius's descriptions. Where the Scottish castle emphasized ancient tradition and house loyalty, Beauxbatons celebrated artistic beauty and unified identity. Both had their merits, but Harry found himself grateful for the less factional approach of his new school. Madame Maxime, the headmistress, made an impressive entrance, her half-giant heritage evident in her statuesque height but carried with such grace and dignity that it inspired respect rather than discomfort. Her welcome speech, delivered in both French and English out of courtesy to international students, emphasized excellence, cooperation, and creative expression as the pillars of Beauxbatons education. "At this academy," she concluded, "we do not merely teach magic as a tool or a weapon, but as an art form and a responsibility. May your time here help you discover not just what you can do with magic, but who you can become through its proper understanding." The feast that followed was exquisite, French cuisine at its finest, supplemented by dishes from other cultures represented in the student body. Harry found himself enjoying the novel experience of a normal school meal, surrounded by peers who were increasingly focused on their food and conversation rather than his presence. From across the hall, he caught Fleur's eye at the 4th-year table. She offered a small, approving nod, having clearly noticed his successful integration with his yearmates. The simple acknowledgement bolstered his confidence further. After dinner, as students made their way back to dormitories, Harry was approached by Professor Lumiere, the deputy headmistress who had coordinated his correspondence studies. "Monsieur Potter Black," she greeted him warmly. "A moment of your time, if you please." Harry excused himself from his roommates and followed the professor to a small antechamber off the main hall. "First, let me officially welcome you to Beauxbatons," she began once they were seated. "Your transition from correspondence studies to full attendance has been unusual but impressively smooth." "Thank you," Harry replied. The correspondence program was excellently designed. Professor Lumiere inclined her head at the compliment. "I wanted to personally ensure you understand the support structures available to you here. While we've worked to maintain your privacy, your situation remains unique." "You mean my continuing healing schedule," Harry surmised. "Precisely." Madame Maxime and I are fully briefed on your need to return to the Veela Sanctuary periodically for ongoing assessment and specialized training. A portkey has been authorized for your use on the scheduled weekends, with appropriate wards to ensure security. She paused before adding, additionally, we understand that your magical core is still stabilizing following the removal of the final binding. Should you experience any difficulties with control or unexpected magical manifestations, my office is always open. I appreciate that, Harry said sincerely. The healers believe I'm stable enough for normal instruction, but they did warn there might be occasional fluctuations. Hence the private room arrangement, Professor Lumiere nodded. While most first years share more communal space, the private areas within your dormitory provide necessary safety margins while still allowing for social integration. Harry had wondered about the spacious accommodations, which seemed more generous than those glimpsed in other first-year rooms they had passed. The consideration for both his safety needs and social development impressed him. There is one other matter, the professor continued, her expression becoming more serious. We have received communications from Albus Dumbledore regarding your enrollment here. Harry stiffened slightly. What did he want? Ostensibly, to offer curriculum coordination to ensure your education meets British standards should you ever wish to return to Hogwarts. Her tone made clear her skepticism regarding this stated motivation. Madame Maxime has politely declined his offer, reminding him that Beauxbaton's curriculum exceeds ICW standards in all subjects and requires no external validation. Relief washed through Harry. Thank you. Your legal and magical guardianship is firmly established with Lord Black and, by extension, the Veela Nation through your heritage acknowledgement, Professor Lumiere assured him. Dumbledore has no authority here, and all staff have been instructed accordingly. This final reassurance eased the last of Harry's immediate concerns. While he had intellectually known that Dumbledore's influence didn't extend to Beauxbatons, having explicit confirmation from the school leadership provided emotional security he hadn't realized he still needed. After a few more administrative details were addressed, Harry rejoined his roommates for the evening orientation activities. As they explored the school grounds with their year group, learning the locations of classrooms, laboratories, and recreational areas, Harry found himself genuinely enjoying the simple experience of being a normal student. When he finally retired to bed that night, listening to the quiet breathing of his roommates in their respective areas, Harry reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From the cupboard under the stairs to Gringotts' revelation, from the Veela Sanctuary's healing to Beauxbaton's elegant halls, each step had moved him further from Dumbledore's carefully planned path and onto one of his own making. Challenges remained, he knew. His magical education was just beginning. The political situation in Britain continued to evolve, with Dumbledore diminished but not defeated. The Unspeakables, according to Sirius's carefully worded updates, were still investigating matters related to Voldemort's potential return. But for perhaps the first time, Harry faced these challenges as himself, fully and completely himself, with his magic unbound, his heritage acknowledged, and his future his own to shape. Whatever came next, he would meet it not as a weapon forged by Dumbledore nor as a symbol created by the wizarding world's expectations, but as Harry Potter Black, wizard, partial Veela, and architect of his own destiny. As sleep claimed him, his last conscious thought was one of quiet determination. The phoenix must burn to be reborn, according to legend. Perhaps the same was true for him. From the ashes of Dumbledore's failed plans and the fire of his awakened Veela heritage, a new Harry had risen, stronger, freer, and ready to forge his own path through whatever lay ahead. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.